and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. This on a day with the major averages for stocks. They are in the green. The Dow Jones Industrial Average right now up 220 points, 1.1% rise. The S&P 500 is up 20 points. That's a rise of 0.9%. The NASDAQ Composite Index up 138 points. That is up almost 2%. It is a wild swinging day today. S&P 500 heading for its first two-day advance. It's mid-February. Now, we had the Fed announcing a coordinated action with other global central banks trying to beef up the dollar liquidity swap line arrangements, trading almost double the 30-day average for this time of day. That, in part, is because we have a quadruple witching day. Now, technology stocks, they're rising as some people start to feed on the bottom, betting on a rebound there. As we look to treasuries, the benchmark 10-year yield is below 1%, getting quite a bid to the benchmark, up 1 8/32 in price, driving the yield down right now 14 basis points. Now, let's not forget crude. NYMEX crude still below $25 a barrel, but it is down right now, down $1 a barrel, down about 4%, 24 at 22. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa and Paul.
Thank you so much, John Tucker. This period of time has been marked by a host of shocks kind of coming together and magnifying what is already a potentially dire situation with the spreading coronavirus and thousands of people that it has killed. There is a question, though, about the oil patch and how much is sort of exacerbated by the fact that Saudi Arabia and Russia appear to be in a tiff that does not seem to be going away anytime soon, where both of them are doubling down on production at a time when demand is falling off a cliff to try to understand this relationship? What happens if they come to some sort of accord and curb production? What will that mean for oil? What will that mean for the entire relationship of nations in the Middle East and Russia? Joining us right now, Professor Megan O'Sullivan, Professor of International Affairs at Harvard's Kennedy School, former National Security Council advisor, also a Bloomberg opinion columnist. Professor, I'd love to get your opinion, for starters, of how long in the making this tiff between Saudi Arabia and Russia really was. I mean, in other words, how entrenched are they on their respective sides, unable or unwilling to come to the table and stop producing as much oil?
Well, as you know, Russia and Saudi Arabia and the rest of OPEC began producing and cooperating in an unprecedented fashion towards in 2016, basically to deal with the price plunge of that time. And for quite a few years, people predicted that this would be a very transitory relationship, both basically between Russia and between Saudi Arabia. And it was more resilient than people thought. Every time there was an opportunity or a need to renew a production cut or to revisit it, people predicted some kind of collapse like the one that we saw on March 6th. But I would say that both sides have been taken by surprise at the market reaction, because unlike the other times when it looked like Russia might walk away from its cooperation with OPEC, this time we have both a supply surge and we have this massive demand contraction. And so while both sides, I don't think were planning for this fallout to happen, the fact that it happened and that the repercussions have been so dramatic, I think does create at least some kind of an opportunity for the two sides to come together in the coming, I would say, months. However, the longer this goes on, I think there are certain new variables that are coming into the mix that could change the trajectory of what I think everyone began thinking was just going to be a temporary kind of tiff that would ultimately be resolved in coming together in a new production cut.
So, Megan, it's just extraordinary to me that the behavior of Saudi Arabia and Russia on the supply side, given what we now know about the demand side and the cratering demand for oil. Who do you think is going to blink first and why?
Well, I mean, we already have seen signs that the Russians are acknowledging that the economic impact here is going to be greater than they thought. We've seen the finance minister just a couple of days ago talk about how Russia is going to go into a deficit. You can see the impact on the ruble. Russia has more difficulty borrowing than Saudi Arabia, so it probably is less well positioned to endure a long-term slow price decline. So I would say if we're really assuming that this is going to result in the two sides coming together, that at some point I think Saudi Arabia is not wrong in thinking that Russia will feel the pain and there'll be an opportunity to come back to the table. However, and I still think that is the main, most likely scenario. However, there are a couple of things unfolding, as I mentioned, that could change the perspectives of these two players. One, the demand plunge is so much deeper than people thought. I mean, literally, it's only been 2 weeks since these two countries came apart, and we've seen that the projections for demand have changed dramatically. 2 weeks ago, Saudi Arabia was arguing that a cut of 1.5 million barrels of oil a day would be enough to stabilize the situation. People are now talking about this quarter of oil demand going down by 10 million barrels of oil a day. So coming together to agree on a cut of 1 million barrels is actually, even within these 2 weeks, is no longer perceived to be sufficient to the challenge at hand. Also, we're seeing producers in the U.S., Brazil, Canada already coming together and saying, you know, it looks likely that our production is going to shrink. We're going to have capex limitations. And this is much quicker, I think, than Saudi Arabia expected. And it must be heartening to these producers, Russia and Saudi Arabia, that have been frustrated that their policies have basically helped higher cost producers. So it's possible that you might have both of these sides, Saudi Arabia in particular, saying, hey, we didn't expect to move to this situation where we were kind of playing for longer, but here we are, and maybe we have to make the best of it given the situation.
So despite that backdrop, given the glut of production and given the fact that demand is falling off way faster than people had expected, I want to put into perspective the huge rise in prices that we saw yesterday after President Trump said that he could intervene, that he would intervene if this carried carries on, and the U.S. has great power to do so, to bring Saudi Arabia and Russia to the table. What power does the United States have to do that?
Well, my feeling is the president is probably overstating the U.S. power here. The U.S. does have a lot of diplomatic and political leverage with Saudi Arabia just because of the importance of that bilateral relationship. And so certainly you can imagine that the United States would be putting a lot of pressure on Saudi Arabia to come to the table, especially if Russia is starting to show indications that it is interested in doing so. The United States does not have much control over Russian behavior, and the thought was that the United States could threaten some more sanctions. I actually think that could backfire. We've seen repeatedly over the last 5 years that Vladimir Putin is willing to take an economic hit in order to stand up to the United States. So to imagine that the threat of sanctions could change Russia's calculation in a way that makes it look like Putin is acquiescing to Trump, I think that is not tenable. An interesting idea surfaced just this morning. You had one of the commissioners of the Texas Railroad Commission saying, actually, Texas could return to a policy of pro-rationing that it hasn't had since the early 70s and rein in some of America's production. That opens the possibility, still I'd say distant, but for a Russia-Saudi U.S. conversation that the Russians have wanted to have for a long time. And that could be where this could go. This would be the real wild card in the situation. But absent that, I don't think the United States has the ability to resolve this problem just through diplomatic pressure.
Hey, Megan, thanks so much for your perspective. We really appreciate you helping us understand what's going on in the global energy markets. Megan O'Sullivan, professor of international affairs at Harvard's Kennedy School, former National Security Council advisor, and a Bloomberg opinion columnist, giving us her sense on the markets here. Again, we still have a little bit weaker oil today after the big pop yesterday, but still way down. Supply and demand not good for the price of oil. The question is, when will Saudi Arabia and Russia come to the table and come to an agreement? This is Bloomberg.
That's saying
you love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Already trending down before the coronavirus struck to the lowest level in at least a decade last year. Christine Todd Whitman, who led the EPA under George W. Bush, suggests the agency could ignore things now and, as she puts it, have a pretty good claim as to why. Former government lawyer Mark Ryan is hopeful big operators will continue to be honest out of fear of the PR backlash of getting caught. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seizechange. change.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labor market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Is there any bank right now in the U.S. that you think is a buy?
Do you think Chairman Powell has lost the market?
Jeff Bezos is no dope. What's the big ka-ching?
The big question, I think, for investors is free cash flow.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
The U.S. tariffs actually hurt both China and the U.S.
Large strategics are looking to either buy or invest in innovation.
Soybeans and corn have been basically at or below the cost of production for about 4 or 5 years.
What we see more bonds, more yield.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up on Bloomberg Markets, we are expected to hear from both Virginia Governor Ralph Northam as well as New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Perhaps we'll get some latest tallies of total diagnoses of coronavirus. Plus, we'll take a look at the food chain and whether there are any potential problems there emerging as supply chains globally get strained. Right now, though, let's head over to John Tucker for a Bloomberg Business Flash. John.
Yeah, some breaking news. It's the Federal Reserve atop that white horse, Lisa. The Fed just announcing it. It's expanding its money market facility to include some municipal debt. We've heard how the muni market's been getting pounded. Right now, as far as stocks, they are gaining across the board right now, seeing a rally. Dow Jones Industrial Average 2% higher, up 402 points. The S&P 500 up 1.6%. That's a 38-point rise. The NASDAQ Composite Index, tech-heavy NASDAQ, up 2.6%. We see investors picking up cheap shares of some of the technology companies right now. S&P 500 headed for its first 2-day advance since mid-February. Earlier, we had the Fed coordinating action with global central banks to beef up the swap line arrangements, the dollar liquidity swap lines. And as far as trading, a lot of volume, trading almost double the 30-day average for this time of day, in part because it's quadruple witching day when we get the expiration of any number of contracts. We have the 10-year yield right now below 1%. Right now at 0.98%. That is down 15 basis points as we get a bid there to the benchmark 10-year note, up 1 and 11/30 seconds. We're also looking at the dollar, the DXY dollar index. That is down right now, 0.8%, snapping a 8-day streak of dollar strength. Crude oil, Brent crude, the international benchmark at 27.98. That is down 1.7%. NYMEX crude, this is West Texas, down almost 4%. We're at 24.22 a barrel. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa and Paul.
And Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. Well, we are awaiting briefings from both Virginia Governor Ralph Northam. Yes?
Yeah, I think that Ralph Northam has begun.
Let's go to Virginia Governor Ralph Northam right now.
But many businesses and many people are doing the responsible thing. And for that, I say thank you. Restaurants that can do so are offering takeout and delivery options. I've also directed Virginia ABC to allow those restaurants to sell beer and wine for takeout and delivery as well. People are working remotely. I know Virginians want to do the right thing so that we can get through this situation together. We also understand this virus, this pandemic, is affecting everyone's lives. It is forcing changes in people's routines, and for many people, it is affecting their jobs and their income. We are doing everything that we can to help people. Later in this briefing, I'll have our Chief Workforce Advisor, Megan Healy, to talk more about how people who are affected can apply for unemployment. But I know that this is hard on people's morale. It is very, very stressful. It is scary. We are all experiencing big, unwanted changes, and we don't know how long this will all last. Putting on my doctor's hat for just a bit, for many people, this increased stress can exacerbate underlying health conditions. It can bring increased depression and anxiety and the risk of domestic violence. People may deal with this by abusing alcohol or drugs. If you or someone you know is feeling depressed or suicidal, please call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-TALK. I'll repeat that, 1-800-273-TALK. The Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration also has a disaster distress helpline 24/7 that provides crisis counseling and support. That number is 1-800-985-5990. I'll repeat that, 1-800-985-5990. And for everyone, as we have said, please check on each other. I know many people are using virtual meetings to spend time together, are sitting 6 feet apart in a friend's yard, and these are good things. Social distancing means physical distancing, but it is critical in a time of such upheaval that we maintain our social ties and our social contract. Now we will hear the latest numbers from our State Health Commissioner, Dr. Norm Oliver.
Thank you, Governor. So the United States as a whole now has more than 13,000 cases of COVID-19 and some 196 deaths. Here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, our current count is 114 cases. We have about another 35 tests that will be in process during the day today, so the case count will go up. That's 10 more cases that have been counted through our state lab, and there will be others that will probably be added from the private labs, LabCorp and Quest. Among the cases reported is a case in Southwest Virginia, so now every region of the Commonwealth has at least one case of COVID-19. We have 19 hospitalizations from COVID-19 to date and 2 deaths. As far as our testing capacity goes, we have we have ability to test more than 1,000 tests. Currently, we got new reagents in the other day, which increased our capacity. I want to underscore something the governor said in his opening remarks. We do not have a medicine for COVID-19. We do not have a vaccine for COVID-19. The only thing we have to prevent the spread of this disease is social distancing. So we need to all do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver.
That's that is Norm Oliver, who is
As I said, we know that this situation is causing businesses to close and people to lose their jobs.
We've been listening to Virginia Health Commissioner Norm Oliver, as well as the Virginia Governor, speaking about the state of the coronavirus in that state. We want to switch gears and head over to the New York State Governor Cuomo, who has been talking about the update there. We don't quite have it yet. He is sitting down, and he has been giving everyone updates every day. And Paul, this is actually what people are watching right now, given the fact that very much the number of cases, the way that states and municipalities are dealing with it has been front and center for markets, for politicians, in order to figure out how to best deal with this and how to price it in. I believe that Andrew Cuomo is speaking now. Let's listen in.
Type of leader. He had so much fun that he retired, and then he came and joined us as Commissioner of Homeland Security. This team and the team we have working on this, New Yorkers should have total confidence. Because they have done it before. They've been in this situation, not this exact situation, but they've handled emergencies and they've handled them all very well. So they are proven. Let's go through this for an update on where we are today. Overview of the system. Everybody knows what we're dealing with. It's preventing an overload of the healthcare system. So the number of acute cases that are coming into the healthcare system, the growth in the number of acute cases must match the capacity of the healthcare system. And that's what we've been working on. We watch the rate of hospitalizations. We watch the rate of ICU hospitalizations even more closely. It's the difference between how many beds you need versus how many ICU beds. And the real focal point, the rate of ventilated patients, because that goes to the number of ventilators as we've been discussing. So those are the three most critical points. We need more beds. We've been saying that. We know that. We've been working on it. There was a discussion with all the hospitals across the state of New York today. There's about a 50,000 bed capacity that has to be increased. It has to be increased in the existing hospitals. We're planning to cancel all non-critical elective surgeries. By definition, elective surgeries that are non-critical can be done at a different time, and now is the time not to do them. We informed the hospitals of that. We're going to set a date probably next week for that. That will free up between 25 to 35% of the existing hospital beds. We have also instructed all the hospitals to maximize capacity. We want to know from each hospital how many beds can you get in your hospital. We're waiving the Department of Health and DFS regulations about space, etc. This would be for a short-term emergency basis, but we want to plan from every hospital, if you use every available space, how many beds can you get in the hospital? And we started that a few weeks ago, but that is now coming to a critical point. With the more beds, you need more staff. So we're going to nursing schools, medical schools, asking retired doctors and nurses to come back into service. Supplies are a major issue. PPE, gloves, gowns, mask suppliers. I am now asking all product providers, all companies who are in this business, we will pay a premium for these products. If you are a business that doesn't manufacture these exact items, but if you have equipment and personnel and you believe that you could manufacture these items, they're not complicated. A mask is not a complicated item to make. A PPE gown is not a complicated item. Gloves, nitrile gloves, are not a complicated item. If you can make them, we will give you funding to do it. And we will give you funding to get the right equipment, to get the personnel, etc. I'm asking businesses to be creative. I'm even looking on the state side. As you know, we went into the hand sanitizer business, which we're now increasing, by the way. We've opened additional hand sanitizer manufacturing areas. But I've also spoken to the state facilities that make uniforms. If you can make a uniform, why can't you make a mask? And we're researching that. But it's that kind of creativity we need from businesses. I can't mandate that businesses make something, but I can offer financial incentives, and that's what we're doing. Any business that's interested should contact Empire State Development Corporation. They will get on it right away. Eric Gertler is the head of that. Any company that wants to sell product should contact my office, the Executive Chamber, Simonita Subotic, at that number. There are also a number of companies that have masks. Goldman Sachs donated 100,000 masks to the state of New York, and I want to thank them. But if you have masks, offices that are non-essential right now, there are dentists' offices that are closed. There are clinics that are closed. We need those masks, those gowns, gloves, and we need them now. In terms of building more beds, as I said, we've had the Army Corps of Engineers here, and we're working with them. There's Lieutenant General Todd Semonite, who is really top professional. Ironically, I worked with him when I was Department of Housing and Urban Development building housing on Native American reservations at the Pine Ridge Reservation. So he's been with the Corps a long time. He's top shelf. We're looking at a possible number of locations for large temporary facilities. Javits Center, number of CUNY sites, number of SUNY sites. St. John's University wants to be helpful, Fordham University. So we're looking at all these sites, and they're all under analysis. Where do we have the space? Where could we get up a temporary facility? How quickly? It's ventilators, ventilators, ventilators. That is the greatest need. We're notifying any health department in the state. If you have a ventilator and you are not using it at this time, or it is non-essential to your use, we want it. If you are a regulated health facility, we are asking you by order of the Department of Health to make that ventilator available. We will purchase it from you. You could lend it to us, but we need ventilators. And anyone who has them now, please call the New York State Department of Health at that number. Again, there are a lot of medical offices that have ventilators that are not operational now, and they're just in the corner of the office. We need those ventilators. The ventilators are to this war what missiles were to World War II, right? Rosie the Riveter. We need ventilators. That is the key piece of equipment. We can get the beds. We'll get the supplies by hook or by crook. But a ventilator is a specific piece of equipment. These are people with a respiratory illness. We need the ventilators. The number one opportunity to make a difference here is to flatten the curve, flatten the increase in the number of cases, as we've talked about. Flatten the increase of the number of cases coming into the hospital system. And the best way to do that is by reducing density. Density control valve, right? And that's what we have been doing all along. And we're going to take it to the ultimate step, which is we're going to close the valve, all right? Because the rate of increase in the number of cases portends a total overwhelming of our hospital system. So we're going to put out an executive order today. New York State on pause, policies that assure uniform safety for everyone. Uniform safety for everyone. Why? Because what I do will affect you. And what you do will affect me. Talk about community and interconnection and interdependence. This is the very realistic embodiment of that. We need everyone to be safe. Otherwise, no one can be safe. We've studied all the other countries. We've talked to people all across the globe about what they did, what they've done, what worked, what doesn't work. And that has all informed this policy. Two basic rules. Only essential businesses will be functioning. People can work at home, God bless you. But only essential businesses can have workers commuting to the job or on the job. Second rule, remain indoors to the greatest extent to protect physical and mental health. On the businesses, on the valve, we reduced it to 50% of the workforce. We then reduced it to 75% of the workforce must stay home. And today we're bringing it to 100% of the workforce must stay home. These are non-essential services. Essential services have to continue to function. Grocery stores need food. Pharmacies need drugs. Your internet has to continue to work. The water has to turn on when you turn the faucet. So there are essential services that will continue to function, but 100% of the workforce. And when I talk about the most drastic action we can take, this is the most drastic action we can take. We also have specific rules for people's conduct. First is for the what we call the quote-unquote vulnerable population. And remember, many people will get this disease. Different countries estimate 70, 80% of the population. People will get it. People will recover. That's what's going to happen for the vast majority. That's what's happening in this state for the vast majority. Who are we worried about? Compromised immune system, people with underlying illnesses. Where are the places we're really worried about? Nursing homes, senior congregate facilities. We need real diligence with vulnerable populations. And there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of different theories and a lot of mixed information. I've gone through it myself with my own family. As I said, we have my mother who lives alone. Everybody wants to help. And we've gone back and forth. Who should go visit mom? Should mom go to my sister's house? Should mom go to this house? Nobody knows for sure. I asked Commissioner Zucker, speak to every health official, get the best rules you can to protect our senior citizens and people with vulnerable populations. And that's what these rules are. Remain indoors, go outside for solitary exercise, pre-screen all visitors and aides, don't visit households with multiple people. Don't go to your daughter's house. Mom doesn't want to be alone. I understand. But you bring her into your house and you have 10 people there and they're coming in and out and your daughters have friends. That is a mistake. That is a mistake. Well, we're going to go visit mom. I'm going to bring the home family to see mom. No, not now. Vulnerable persons should wear a mask when in the company of others. To the greatest extent, everyone in the presence of a vulnerable person should wear a mask. They shouldn't be on public transportation unless it is urgent and absolutely necessary. Well, what does that mean? It means urgent and absolutely necessary. It means what the words say. I call it Matilda's Law. My mother's name is Matilda. Everybody's mother, father, sister, friend in a vulnerable population. This is about protecting them. It's about protecting them. What you do is highly affects their health and well-being. The instinct to love, I want to be with them. I want my kids. Mom wants to see the kids. Be smart. My mother and your mother. For non-vulnerable populations, these are the rules. No non-essential gatherings. Any concentration of individuals is because you're an essential business and an essential workforce. When in public, social distancing at least 6 feet. Outdoor recreation is a solitary recreational exercise. It's running, it's hiking. It's not playing basketball with 5 other people. That's not what it is. It's not laying in a park with 10 other people and sharing a beer. That's not what this is. There are people and places in New York City where it looks like life as usual. No, this is not life as usual. And accept it and realize it and deal with it. Sick individuals should not leave their home unless to receive medical care, etc. Young people need to practice social distancing, avoid contact with vulnerable populations. Precaution, alcohol wipes. We talk a lot about hand sanitizer. Since I went into the hand sanitizer business, I'm a semi-expert on hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is alcohol. That's what it is. You can't get hand sanitizer, get a bottle of alcohol, pour it on wipes, paper towels. That's an alcohol wipe. Hand sanitizer now, according to the CDC, has to be over 60% alcohol to be effective. These provisions will be enforced. These are not helpful hints. This is not if you really want to be a great citizen. These are legal provisions. They will be enforced. There will be a civil fine and mandatory closure for any business that is not in compliance. Again, your actions can affect my health. That's where we are. So there is a social compact that we have. Government makes sure society is safe for everyone. What you do can affect my health. There's some bad information, especially among young people. You look at some of these videos that are going around and some of these newscasts on what young people are saying. I can't get it. Yeah, that's wrong. That is wrong. Well, young people can't get it. That is wrong. It's just not a factual statement. 20% of coronavirus cases, according to CDC, ages 20 to 44. Okay? France, more than 50% of the coronavirus patients in ICU under 60 years old. You can get it. Well, I can't transmit it if I'm not symptomatic. No, you can transmit it if you're not symptomatic. And even if you're young and strong and everybody's Superman, Superwoman, I can deal with it. Oh, yeah? You can give it to your grandparent, you can give it to your parent, and you can put somebody else's life in danger. But just factually, a lot of these premises are wrong. These are nothing that people don't know. It's nothing that we haven't been talking about, but we have to do it. And we have to be serious. And again, it is a government responsibility. Everyone has personal freedom. Everyone has personal liberty. And we respect that, and I'll always protect that. But everybody also has a responsibility to everyone else. And this is a specific case of that. I believe in regional actions. None of these policies work unless the geographic area is an area that works. I have spoken to the governor of New Jersey, governor of Connecticut about the actions that we're taking today. I'm going to speak with him later this afternoon. We have been coordinating to the greatest extent possible, and they're going to be considering these policies, which again are very dramatic. And I said I'd like to do it in coordination. I understand we have somewhat of a different circumstance in New York, but they are considering it. We've added Pennsylvania and Delaware to the states we're working with. And again, you can have businesses in New Jersey. If they don't close, then their workers are driving into New York. Businesses in Connecticut stay open. You need New Yorkers to drive up to those businesses. So regional action is the best. We're talking. I'll speak with them later today. The number of cases, and you can see why we've taken these dramatic actions. Total positive up to 7,000, 2,900 new positive cases. Now, I've told you in the past that the number of cases is relative to the number of tests. I've also said that New York has been very aggressive about increasing our number of tests. We went to the federal government. We asked for authority to allow the state to run the tests as opposed to waiting for the federal government. The president granted us that ability. I ramped up all the labs in our state. We opened drive-throughs all across the state. We have the testing so high in New York right now that we're testing per capita more than China or South Korea, okay? And China and South Korea obviously had a much longer time to ramp up. So we have done a great job at ramping up the number of tests. But when you ramp up the number of tests, you're going to get more positive cases. Well, now we're more worried. No, because it was the reality. The tests are just demonstrating what was. And again, if we could do more tests, you would find more positives. And finding positives is a good thing because then we can isolate and we can track back. The number of counties continues to increase, and it will until that entire state is blue. Blue is not a political statement, by the way. It's just blue versus yellow. New York now has 7,000 cases. That compares to state of Washington that has 1,000, California that has 1,000 and change. So you can see that New York is in a dramatically different position, and you can see why we're taking these actions. Now, again, New York may very well be testing at a multiple of the other states. So does New York necessarily have 7 times more people who are infected than California? You don't know. You know that we are doing more tests per capita, but you don't know what the actual infection rate is. In total, we have tested 32,000 people. We did 10,000 tests last night. I had said last week that we would hope to get to 6,000 tests. We've gotten to 10,000 tests, which, again, I'm very proud of the operation. But again, that's why you see the number going up. The rate of hospitalization, watch this number. It's 18%, 1,200 out of 7,100. Again, overall perspective, look at the Johns Hopkins numbers. People will get sick. People will resolve. You look at our cases, the first case we had, the first healthcare worker, that case, she was never hospitalized, she stayed home, and she now tests negative. That's what's going to happen with 80% of the people. So, why is New York taking these dramatic actions? We know from past history that what a locality does matters. The 1918 Spanish flu, which also reminds us that this has happened before in society, right? This tendency to think, oh, this is something new, it's a science fiction movie. Yeah, well, in 1918, they had a flu epidemic. But St. Louis took one course of action, Philadelphia took another course of action, and it made a dramatic difference in the number of people that died. What government did at that moment made a dramatic difference, and not nationally, locally. Yes, New York has the tightest controls in the country. You look at those numbers and you understand why. Look at the increase in the number of cases. 16 days ago, we were at 0. Today, we are at 2,900. Those numbers are why we're taking these actions. Just increase that curve, and you will see it more than doubles our healthcare system capacity. It more than triples the number of ICU beds with ventilators that we could possibly arrange. That's why we're taking these actions. These actions will cause disruption. They will cause businesses to close. They'll cause employees to stay at home. I understand that. They will cause much unhappiness. I understand that also. I've spoken to my colleagues around the state, the elected officials. I've spoken to business leaders. There is a divergence of opinion. There's a spectrum of opinion. Some people say that we don't need to do this. It's going to hurt the economy. I understand that. Some people want to make it clear that they are disassociated from these actions. I understand that. And just so we're all clear, this is a statewide order. It's not what your county executive is doing. It's not what your mayor is doing. It's not what anyone else but me is doing. And I accept full responsibility. If someone is unhappy, somebody wants to blame someone or complain about someone, blame me. There is no one else who is responsible for this decision. I've been in public service for many years on every level of public service. I've managed dozens of emergencies. The philosophy that always worked for me is prepare for the worst and hope for the best. That's what we're doing here. When we look back at this situation 10 years from now, I want to be able to say, I can say to the people of the state of New York, I did everything we could do. I did everything we could do. And this is about saving lives. And if everything we do saves just one life, I'll be happy. Last point, I'd also like people to think about, and I don't have an answer for this, and it's not what I do, but the isolation that people are feeling and the mental health consequences of what we're doing. When we quarantined people, you know, we quarantined about 10,000 people. 14 days you had to stay at home. And I spoke to many of them. And what they would say is, physically, operationally, it was difficult. But most of all, they would all talk about the sense of isolation and the feeling of isolation and not having human contact and how difficult that was. I, as you know, had my daughter who was in isolation. And I was very aware of what she was dealing with and what she was feeling. And I'll tell you the truth, I had some of the best conversations with her that I have ever had. She was alone for 2 weeks with her own thoughts, not talking to anyone else, no noise, no activity. And we talked about things in depth that we didn't have time to talk about in the past, or we didn't have the courage or the strength to talk about in the past. Feelings that I had about mistakes that I had made along the way that I wanted to express my regret and talk through with her. People are in a small apartment. They're in a house. They're worried. They're anxious. Just be mindful of that. You know, those three-word sentences can make all the difference. I miss you. You know, I love you. I'm thinking about you. I wish I was there with you. I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm sorry we're going through this. That's going to be a situation that is going to develop because we're all in quarantine now. I mean, think about it. We're all in various levels of quarantine. And it's hard. It's hard economically, it's hard everywhere, but it's going to be hard here, it's going to be hard here. And it takes each of us to try to help with that. The last announcement. With all that's going on, I want to protect the people of the state of New York as much as I can. I'm going to stop any evictions of any residential or commercial tenants for 90 days. There'll be a moratorium on evictions, residential or commercial, for 90 days. I understand that may affect businesses negatively, and I've spoken to a number of them. I don't know who you think you're going to rent an apartment to now anyway, if you kick someone out. By my mandate, you couldn't even have your real estate agent out showing the apartment. Same with the commercial tenants. But I know that we're going to put people out of work with what I did. I want to make sure I don't put them out of their house. Questions, comments?
What prompted the change in thinking in terms of what seems to be a shelter-in-place order that you're issuing today?
It's not a shelter-in-place order.
But it's effectively the same idea.
No, it is not. First of all, words matter. California does not have a shelter-in-place order, right? They put in a new policy. It is not shelter-in-place. Right? Because, and this is why words matter, Jesse, because people are scared and people panic. Shelter in place is used currently for an active shooter or a school shooting. It was during a nuclear event. Isolate yourself in the interior room, no windows, stay there until you get the all clear sign. The quote-unquote shelter-in-place policy was never shelter-in-place. It said shelter-in-place, accept this, accept this, accept this, accept this, accept this. And it scared a lot of people, and it panicked people. And even California doesn't call it that anymore. So why am I increasing the mandates? Because the numbers are increasing. And I said, from day one, this is science and math. Watch the number, watch the trajectory. You have the density control valve. The number starts to go up, tighten the valve. If the number doesn't slow down, tighten the valve more. If the number doesn't slow down, tighten the valve more. If the number doesn't slow down, close the valve. We're closing the valve.
When does this take effect?
Sunday evening.
When is it going to take out for restaurants and workers are being told to stay home?
I'm sorry?
Will this include restaurant workers, like for delivery and all that?
Delivery services of food are an essential service.
What about mass transit? Obviously, you've got fewer
mass transit is operational because we have to get people to hospitals. Mass transit is operational because we have to get the essential workers to work.
A weekend schedule or something?
We are not doing any of that right now. Remember, this all comes down to the healthcare system, and we're scrambling to increase the capacity of the healthcare system. We have to get nurses, doctors, healthcare workers, child care, and we need to get them to work. So the public transit system would be operational.
Governor, is anyone monitoring or policing these businesses to make sure they're abiding by this 100% rule?
We said for the first time, this is not voluntary, it's not helpful hints. We are going to monitor it. There will be civil fines, and there can be mandatory closures for businesses that don't comply. I am not kidding about this. The numbers are going up at such a rate that, as I said, it's more than double the capacity of the hospital system. It's more than triple the capacity of the ICU system. We can't get more ventilators. I can't increase that side of the equation. I can't create more ICU beds with ventilators. The only option available to us is to reduce the spread and reduce the rate of the spread. So close the valve. Step two, make sure people follow the regulations and the guidance, and that's enforcement. So if a business that's not supposed to be open is open, yes, we will enforce it and they will be penalized. It's also, by the way, rude, disrespectful of basic social obligations.
Can you please speak to what individuals, any penalties or fines individuals might face if they break these rules? You know, a cluster of young people at a park. Can you speak to what?
We don't have any individual fines at this point. I hope they get the information. I think with young people, and we talked about this yesterday, part of it is they're just wrong. They have the wrong information. And that's what I'm trying to say today. They're just wrong. I mean, I can't tell you how many young people are out there saying, oh, I can't get it, doesn't affect young people. No, you're just wrong. I can't transfer it. You're just wrong. And this is lunacy, what they're doing in some parks, in some areas, hanging out on a park bench. They're playing basketball. You know, when you're young, you think you're invincible. Yeah, you're wrong. And social distancing means social distancing. It means no more than 6 feet. You can't play basketball and stay 6 feet from each other.
So, but no, as of
well, you can, but you'd lose.
Yeah, but as of this point, so no civil fines or penalties.
We have no civil fines on individuals at this time.
Governor, do you want the president to use the Defense Production Act to ramp up production of medical supplies?
Look, I am. If I had a New York State Defense Production Act, I would use it, Jesse. I don't have it. So what I'm saying is, I'll pay businesses more. I'll fund a new business if you can make these products. I'm trying to make these products. If you are in this line of work, you know, we need masks. If you're making clothing, figure out if you can make masks. I'll fund it. So I'm doing everything I can to increase the production. That's besides having people all over the globe trying to buy product, right? We talked about Empire State Development people literally running around China trying to buy product. So if I had it, I would use it.
And Dr. Zucker, you've mentioned stockpiles. There's 3 stockpiles around the state of masks, gloves, things like that. Have those been dipped into? Or are you shipping those to hospitals around the state?
We have dipped into those, and we are providing those to the hospitals that are across the state, and we're also working to resupply them.
Can you give us a sense of how many you've shipped across the state?
I'd have to look to give you an exact number.
The federal government extended tax filing deadlines to sometime in the summer. Is the same? What's New York's new deadline?
The deadline is the federal deadline. And Robert Mujica, the man of many facial communications, will explain it.
So because of electronic filing, we're tied to the federal deadline. So our deadline will also then move with the federal deadline to the end of July. On the sales tax deadline, we're going to forgive interest and penalties related to the sales tax.
So are you pushing the deadline back?
The deadline stays the same, but there's no interest or penalties for those who can't pay or give their.
This is the deadline they won't be charged.
Correct.
Yeah. Or penalty.
Or penalty. Interest or penalty.
Penalty is worse than the interest.
At this point, can inmates and detainees use hand sanitizer? I think there's a few cases in Rikers where they can.
Sure. We're making hand sanitizer. By the way, you know, a lot of people got annoyed that we use Corecraft, which is the prison company, to make hand sanitizer. The Corecraft company was already making chemicals, detergents, automobile lubricants, hand soap. So it was in their line of work. But the hand sanitizer is distributed to prisons, public transportation facilities, state government, local governments, etc. And we're increasing the production of hand sanitizer through Corecraft because we need it. The shortage has only gotten worse.
What's the state's new death count as of this morning?
Do you know that? 35 people.
How many people in New York City?
I don't know. I can get you the breakout. Do you know off the top of your head how many in New York City?
No, we should up there.
Do you have a range of the ages and
was that up there?
underlying health conditions?
I'm sorry, can you say that, Joseph?
Do we have a range of ages for those who have died and whether or not they all have underlying health conditions?
Primarily senior citizens.
Governor, we now know that Albany Medical Center and St. Peter's Hospital have stopped performing tests. We understand that Ellis Hospital has run out of them. People in the capital region, is there a place they can go to get tested?
Doctor? Sorry, I was looking at the slide. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We've heard that Albany Medical Center and St. Peter's Hospital have stopped performing tests, and Ellis Hospital has apparently run out of them. So people in the capital region who might need to be tested, where might they go?
At the Albany Medical Center, they're still testing. We can look at other places if we feel that there aren't enough places to provide the test for people.
And actually, we have worked that out. We're working with BioReference, who's our lab that came online earlier this week, and they're going to be processing tests for Albany now.
Also, some other states, and obviously Albany had this announcement that the only people who are going to get tested are quote-unquote frontline, doctors, nurses, first responders, etc. And that if you're sick, you think you might have coronavirus, the advice is going to be stay home, don't go out, get yourself well.
We've been listening to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo saying he took the most extreme measures that he possibly can, saying that 100% of non-essential workers in the state must remain home and cannot go outside unless they're exercising in a solitary fashion, which is running or jogging, or if they're going to the grocery store or to an essential service that they are providing. We will get you more details on exactly what that means. The S&P has turned negative. Right now, let's head over to President Trump, who is getting ready to have a conversation about what the latest is. It's a workforce led by the White House. Let's head over there. Oh, he's not out yet. Paul, it's really interesting to see how some of the officials are trying to come out and get ahead of this. Governor Cuomo had some pretty stark language there, saying that we are running out of capacity in New York State, looking for some support from the federal government. President Trump currently there speaking. Let's take a listen.
We're working on various elements of the deal, and the Democrats are very much wanting something to happen, and the Republicans likewise are very much wanting something to happen, and I think it will. I spoke at length with Mitch McConnell, and there's tremendous spirit to get something done, so we'll see what happens, but my conversation was very good with Senator Schumer. I thank you all for joining us, and I'd like to begin by providing an update on what we are doing to minimize the impact of the Chinese virus on our nation's students. With many schools closed due to the virus, the Department of Education will not enforce standardized testing requirements, very importantly, for students in elementary through high school for the current year. They've been through a lot. They've been going back and forth, schools open, schools not open. It's been all standardized testing, and, we're not going to be enforcing that, so I think you can let the people know. I think probably a lot of the students would be extremely happy. Some probably not. The ones that work hard, maybe not, but it's one of those things. Unfortunate, very unfortunate circumstance. We've also temporarily waived all interest on federally held student loans. They'll be very happy to hear that. And I've instructed them to take that action immediately. And today, Secretary DeVos has directed federal lenders to allow borrowers to suspend their student loans and loan payments without penalty for at least the next 60 days. And if we need more, we'll extend that period of time. Borrowers should contact their lenders, but we've given them very strong instructions. So we've temporarily waived all interest on federally held student loans. That's a big thing. That's going to make a lot of students very happy. And we have more to come on student loans, more good news for the students, but we'll do that at a different time. This morning, the Treasury Department also announced that we're moving tax day from April 15th to July 15th, so we're moving it out to July 15th so that people will have time and people will be able to, hopefully by that time, we'll have people getting back to their lives. Families and businesses will have this extra time to file with no interest or penalties. We're getting rid of interest and penalties. However, if you have refunds or credits you would like to claim, you may still file. In other words, you can file early if you are owed money by the IRS. Other than that, we're moving it all the way out to July 15th. No interest, no penalties. Your new date will be July 15th. Today, our team will also provide an update on our continuing effort to prevent the transmission of virus across America's borders. And I watched what's been happening in California with Governor Newsom and this morning with Governor Cuomo, and I applaud them. They're taking very strong, bold steps, and I applaud them. And we're all working together. We're working very closely together, including those two governors. But I would say, based on the call, the media was there. I think we can say that with respect to virtually every governor on that call. I think every governor. We had almost all of them, if not all of them. And I would say that you could see for yourselves that the level of respect and esprit de corps working together was extraordinary. There was nobody angry, nobody upset. We're able to help them, and that's what we're all about. We want to help. We're doing things that a lot of people wouldn't be able to do. But the relationship with governors and states is, I think, very extraordinary, especially under the circumstances where this just came upon us. We're working with Canada and Mexico to prevent the spread of the virus across North America very closely. You heard what we did yesterday with Canada. And Secretary of State Pompeo will be making a statement in a little while having to do with Mexico and the border. And Chad Wolf will likewise be making a statement. There's a joint comprehensive effort in collaboration with our neighbors. The measure and all of those measures that we're putting in place will protect the health of all three nations and reduce the incentive for a mass global migration that would badly deplete the healthcare resources needed for our people. And so we are working very closely with Mexico, very, very closely with Canada. The relationship's never been better. We're all working toward the same goal. Our nation's top healthcare officials are extremely concerned about the grave public health consequences of mass, uncontrolled cross-border movement. And that would be mostly, and even beyond, but mostly during this global pandemic. Every week, our border agents encounter thousands of unscreened, unvetted, and unauthorized entries from dozens of countries, and we've had this problem for decades. For decades, you know the story, but now it's with the national emergencies and all of the other things that we've declared, we can actually do something about it. We're taking a very strong hold of that. And we have before, but this is now at a level that nobody's ever approached. In normal times, these massive flows place a vast burden on our healthcare system. But during a global pandemic, they threaten to create a perfect storm that would spread the infection to our border agents, migrants, and to the public at large. Left unchecked, this would cripple our immigration system, overwhelm our healthcare system, and severely damage our national security. We're not going to let that happen. So we have a lot of information, and they'll be discussing that in a moment. To confront these public health degrees, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has decided to exercise its authority under the Title 42 of the U.S. Code to give customers of border protection the tools it needs to prevent the transmission of the virus coming through both the northern and the southern borders. So we're treating the borders equally, the northern border and the southern border. It's being treated, they're both being treated equally. A lot of people say that they're not treated equally. Well, they are. As we did with Canada, we're also working with Mexico to implement new rules at our ports of entry to suspend non-essential travel. These new rules and procedures will not impede lawful trade and commerce. Furthermore, Mexico is taking action to secure our own southern border and suspend air travel from Europe. So we're coordinating very closely the air travel going to Mexico and then trying to come into the United States. The actions we're taking together with our North American partners will save countless lives. At the conclusion of my remarks, Secretary Azar, Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Wolf, we're going to be also taking some questions with Tony and Deborah, who you've gotten to know very well. But they'll be discussing certain things, and I think you'll find them of great interest. We're going to be providing tremendous amounts of detail over the coming days, but a lot of it will be provided right now if you'd like to find out about it. There's been a week of resolute action, tremendous relationships have developed with people that frankly didn't get along, people that didn't like each other. They're now working together and maybe even in some cases learning about each other and liking each other. It's a nice thing. I invoked the Defense Production Act, and last night we put it into gear. We moved the National Response Coordination Center to the highest level of activists. I mean, if you take a look at what we did, the level of activation has been increased to a grade 1 level, which is the highest level. We're providing historic support to small businesses and to the states. The states need support. Normally they do this themselves, but because of the magnitude of it, the federal government has gotten very much involved in terms of getting the equipment they need. So we're helping them. It's a responsibility they have, but we are helping states a lot. That's why the governors, I think, in every case have been impressed and very nice. We enacted legislation guaranteeing paid sick leave for workers at no cost to employers. And I think it's very important. So they get paid sick leave at no cost to employers. We're accelerating the use of new drug treatments. We're advancing legislation to give direct payments to hardworking families. Throughout our country, Americans from all walks of life are rallying together to defeat the unseen enemy striking our nation. In times of struggle, we see the true greatness of the American character, and we are seeing that. A lot of people are talking about it. We're in 141 countries from what they're telling me, and some of those countries are really working in a unified manner, and they're working very unified with us, almost, I could say, a good number of them. Doctors and nurses are working nonstop to heal the sick. Citizens and churches are delivering meals to the needy. Truckers are making the long haul to keep shelves stocked. We've been dealing with the big stores and the big chains, Walmart. They've been fantastic, and others. They've all been fantastic. We've made it much easier for them to stock in terms of travel and travel restrictions. We're lifting restrictions so they can get their trucks on time. You're seeing very few empty shelves, and yet the amount of volume that they're doing is unprecedented because people want to have what they have to have, what they feel they have to have. And they're also buying in slightly smaller quantities, which is good because we're not going anywhere. We're going to be here. So I want to thank all of those very great companies for working so well. Americans from every walk of life are coming together, and thanks to the spirit of our people, we will win this war, and we're winning, and we're going to win this war. America will triumph, and America will rise higher than ever before. We'll be stronger than ever before, and we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about relying on other countries, and I can say that I think in both a very good and a very bad way. Some good things came out of it, and some not so good things came out of it. So I'd like to move now to invite our team to provide information on the new measures to prevent viral spread at our borders, and I'll start by asking Secretary of State Pompeo to speak. He's doing a fantastic job, and like everyone else, he's been working very, very long and very, very hard, and he's doing the other more normal jobs of a great Secretary of State, but he got tied into this like everybody else, and he's been really doing a fantastic job. Mike, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I address the efforts that we've been engaged in to push back against the Chinese virus, I want to assure the American people that, as President Trump just said, your State Department, your entire national security team is staying focused on the other diplomatic challenges around the world. Those include reducing risk to America from Afghanistan, holding the Iranian regime accountable for its malign activity, and our counterterrorism efforts against ISIS remain a priority for our team. Our number one priority across those mission sets remains the protection of the American people. The President and our team are very focused on it. I'll take this moment, too, to thank my team, State Department team, who is working long hours all around the world to take care of Americans. who are stuck in places around the world. I'll talk about that more in just a minute. You've all seen Dr. Birx with me, State Department officials who's doing great work, but I want to give a shout out to all of the State Department team here in Washington and around the world that are working overtime to help us push back against this pandemic. Under the President's leadership this week, we've taken two important steps. First, as President Trump announced on Wednesday, the United States and Canada jointly agreed to restrict all non-essential traffic across our border. This decision goes into effect tonight at midnight. The restrictions will be reviewed after 30 days, and they exclude traffic and movement across the border for work or other essential reasons. We're grateful to have such an outstanding friend to the north who is committed, as we are, to defeating this virus. I also want to announce today that the United States and Mexico have agreed to restrict non-essential travel across our shared border. Both our countries know the importance of working together to limit the spread of the virus, to ensure that commerce that supports our economy continues to keep flowing. Here, too, the United States is glad to have a friend who's working side by side us in the fight. Secretary Wolf will talk a little bit more about the details of how we're working alongside our partner in Mexico to keep our southern border safe and secure as well. On another note, yesterday the State Department issued a Level 4 global travel advisory. This means that all international travel from U.S. citizens should be avoided. In countries where commercial departure options remain available, U.S. citizens who reside in the United States should arrange for immediate return to the United States unless they're prepared to remain abroad for an extended time. If you choose to travel internationally, your travel plans may well be severely disrupted. And finally, I want to talk about the disinformation that people are seeing, both on Twitter and around the world, some of it coming from government, some of it coming from other individuals. Just urge everyone, as they're seeing information that at one time suggested somehow this virus emanated from the United States Army, this information about lockdowns that are taking place. Every American, indeed people all around the world, should ensure that where they turn to for information is a reliable source and not a bad actor trying to create and flow information that they know is wrong. This is a tough fight. The American people are tougher. Our diplomatic teams are working around the clock to help them keep safe both home and abroad. And we're showing once again the global leadership that America has always delivered. And it's been great to see countries around the world rally behind what President Trump and our team are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. And we'll take questions right after this. Chad Wolf. Yes?
Right behind you. Well, let me start off by thanking the President and the Vice President for their continued leadership and commitment for protecting the American people during this crisis. Early on, the President, again, took unprecedented actions to restrict travel from areas affected with the coronavirus. And to date, DHS has screened over 200,000 individuals coming back from those affected countries. This has been an immense undertaking, but one that the men and women of DHS have successfully accomplished. Today's announcement is yet another example of the extraordinary steps the administration is taking to ensure the safety of the American public. Before I comment on the CDC order that I'm sure Secretary Azar will later elaborate on, let me first address the progress as Secretary Pompeo and others have made with our Canadian and Mexican partners regarding cross-border travel. As we continue to evaluate common sense measures that reduce risk and prevent further spread, it only makes sense that we have looked at the measures that our neighbors to the north and south are undertaking. And so we've been working closely with those partners since the earliest days of this virus and the outbreak. And again, as the President said earlier this week, and Secretary Pompeo, we've reached an agreement with both Canada and Mexico to limit non-essential travel across our land borders. Let me be clear that neither of these agreements with Canada or Mexico applies to lawful trade or commerce. Essential commercial activities will not be impacted. We will continue to maintain a strong and secure economic supply chain across our borders. A few examples of essential travel include, but certainly are not limited to, individuals traveling for medical purposes, to attend educational institutions, for emergency response, public health services, and individuals engaged in lawful cross-border trade. As the Secretary said, the agreements with both Canada and Mexico will go into effect on Saturday, March 21st. Furthermore, we're also working collaboratively with Canada and Mexico to take decisive joint action regarding individuals seeking entry between our ports of entry. The CDC order directs the Department to suspend the introduction of all individuals seeking to enter the U.S. without proper travel documentation. That's for both the northern and southern border. The CDC director has determined that the introduction and spread of the coronavirus in the department's border patrol stations and detention facilities presents a serious danger to migrants, our frontline agents, and officers, and the American people. So it's important to note that the department currently apprehends foreign nationals from over 120 different countries around the world, the vast majority of those having coronavirus cases. Many of these individuals arrive with little or no identity, travel, or medical documentation, making public health risk determinations all but impossible. It's also important to note that the outbreak on our southern border would likely increase the strain on health systems in our border communities, taking away important and life-saving resources from American citizens. Tonight, again at midnight, we will execute the CDC order by immediately returning individuals arriving without documentation to Canada, Mexico, as well as a number of other countries without delay. And so, again, CBP is positioned to execute these measures as we continue to keep our borders secure and safe. Before I conclude, let me just wrap up by thanking the brave men and women of DHS, specifically CBP, and across the government for the work that they do day in and day out to keep the American people safe from the coronavirus. The department has a number of frontline officers that have tested positive, as well as others who are self-quarantining, and that I am doing everything that I can to protect these patriots as they continue to defend our homeland during this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thank you.
Today's announcement is just the latest in a long line of bold, decisive actions the president has taken to protect Americans from the coronavirus spreading across our borders. In January, within 2 weeks of China's notifying WHO about the virus, and with only 45 cases in China, we began screening travelers from Wuhan. Then over time, as the outbreak evolved, the president restricted travel from China, Iran, and Europe. Our health experts say that these measures have been truly effective at slowing the virus's spread to our shores. Just think about this. Italy and the United States both saw their first travel-related case of coronavirus around the exact same time, the last week of January. And yet we have had precious time to continue our work around vaccines, therapeutics, and other preparations, while Italy has tragically been overwhelmed with critical patients for several weeks now. The president today is taking action to slow the spread of infectious disease via our border. Under Section 362 of the Public Health Service Act, the CDC is suspending the entry of certain persons into the United States because of the public health threat that their entry into the United States represents. This order applies to persons coming from Mexico and Canada who are seeking to enter the country illegally and who would normally be held in a congregate setting like a Customs and Border Protection station. It does not apply to U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents. During this pandemic, a number of health challenges arise when illegal immigrants arrive at our northern and southern borders and are taken into immigration custody. We're talking about significant numbers of illegal immigrants. From this past October through February, DHS has processed more than 21,000 inadmissible aliens at the northern border and more than 151,000 inadmissible aliens at the southern border. CBP facilities were never designed to hold large numbers of people and to protect agents and migrants from infection during a pandemic, nor to treat them for a novel virus if large numbers are infected. When held at border facilities, these migrants risk spreading the virus to other migrants, to CBP agents and border healthcare workers, and even the United States population as a whole. In such circumstances, the kind of social distancing measures the CDC and the president have recommended are simply not possible. On top of that, any resources that we are using to reduce the risk of infection among CBP agents, healthcare workers, and migrants in these facilities are drawing on an American healthcare system that is already fighting the coronavirus pandemic. That's why the president and his administration are taking these important steps to keep Americans and our immigration system safe from these health risks as part of our whole-of-government approach to combating the coronavirus. Thank you, Mr. President, for the work that you've been doing throughout this crisis to slow the spread of the coronavirus and to keep our country safe.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Tony or Dan? Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we continue to review the data very carefully from around the globe, as I know many of you are. We continue to see signs that, again, individuals under 20, 19 and under may have severe disease, but majority and all have recovered to date. We still see that same trend. And frankly, from Italy, we're seeing another concerning trend, that the mortality in males seems to be twice in every age group of females. This should alert all of us to continue our vigilance to protect our Americans that are in nursing homes. This requires all of the community, and when you see the sacrifices that many Americans have made, the sacrifices that the service industry has made to close their restaurants, close their bars, and so that the spread is discontinued, and then you really understand how all of Americans must make the same sacrifice. We continue to ask you to follow the presidential guidelines of no groups coming together of more than 10, that if anyone in the household is sick, that everyone quarantines in the household together, and that we continue to focus on those who have the most vulnerability to this illness. Now, to the moms and dads out there that have children with immunodeficiencies or other medical conditions, we don't know the level of risk, and I know you will also protect them in the same way. There just is not enough numbers at this time to really tell them if they're at additional risk or not in the same way that adults are. I don't have any new data. I can see the look on your face of saying, is she seeing something new? I don't have any new data, but I think it's important for us to be as honest with the American people as we can. And when we don't have data, be very clear that we don't know. Finally, no one is immune. I sometimes hear people on radio or others talking about, I'm immune to the virus. We don't know if the contagion levels are different in age groups, but we know it's highly contagious to everyone. Do not interpret mild or moderate disease as lack of contagion or that you're immune. You just happen to have a better immune system and the ability to fight the virus in a way that maybe older people or people with existing medical conditions can't. And that's why it's very important at this moment that all of you carry that message about the sacrifices that many have made, particularly our service providers and our frontline healthcare workers. They are making that sacrifice every day so that every American can move through this well. But we need every American following the presidential guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tony, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just want to underscore a couple of things that I've said a few times to this group. You may recall that just a week ago or so, I said the two pillars, the two elements of our capability to contain the infection and the surge of infections in this country rely on two things: keeping infections from coming from without in. We've been very successful in doing that with China and with Europe. Now we have the northern and southern border issues. There's a fundamental public health reason for doing that, because we cannot be preventing people from coming in from one area when they can actually go into the other. So that's an important reason. Understand that there's a public health reason for doing that. The second thing I think is really important is what happened in New York today, what Governor Cuomo mentioned about an hour ago, some rather strong issues that have been addressed with his recommendations. Not recommendations, essentially orders. Now, we have a group of recommendations and guidelines that are applicable to the entire country. You know them. We've been over them. Yet there are places, regions, states, cities in this country that are being stressed much, much more than the country as a whole. Clearly, one of them was Washington. Another one was California. Governor Newsom made some very important, difficult decisions. Today, Governor Cuomo did the same thing. And I want to say I strongly support what he's doing. And one thing, as a New Yorker myself, for those of you who haven't figured out from my accent that I'm from New York, as a New Yorker, I know what New Yorkers can do. We're tough. I was in New York City on September 11th, 2001. And I know what the New Yorkers can do. So please cooperate with your governor, cooperate with your mayor. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
That's great.
Thank you, Mr. President. The White House Coronavirus Task Force met this morning. We continue at the President's direction to bring the full resources, not just of the federal government, but in full partnership with our state governments, businesses around America, and a partnership with the American people to respond to the threat of the coronavirus. And I know I can speak on behalf of the President with confidence when I say how inspired we are by the way the American people and American businesses are coming together to help defeat this virus in our country. Millions of Americans are putting into practice the President's 15-day guidelines, and we encourage everyone, even those that are not in areas with significant outbreak, to review these guidelines over the next week and more and put them into practice, and you'll continue to do your part. Later today, we'll be talking with manufacturers around the country, and the President and I continue to be inspired by the way American industry is stepping forward. We have businesses around the country that are literally volunteering to retrofit plants to help us meet the needs of our healthcare workers and our healthcare system in confronting the coronavirus. As the President mentioned yesterday, following his decision to put FEMA in the lead, the emergency declaration, we actually met with all the nation's governors from the FEMA National Response Coordination Center. The President and I, our entire team at the federal level, couldn't be more grateful for the efforts of all of our governors in implementing the guidance that is being issued not only from our task force, but also in taking strong measures in their own communities to protect their citizens. We want to urge every American to heed your local authorities. Listen to their guidance and also do your part to slow the spread. We reiterated to all of the governors that the President, by putting FEMA in the lead, will continue to implement a plan that is locally executed, state managed, and federally supported that puts the health of America first. We have received a report today, as the President mentioned, on our legislative team on Capitol Hill. We're working with Republicans and Democrats at this very hour to pass an economic recovery package that the President described, and we hope to see the Congress act on that early next week. On the subject of supplies, we continue to make steady progress on testing. Thanks to the President's involvement of commercial labs, the public and private partnership, more and more Americans are being tested every single day. And tomorrow, Admiral Gua and FEMA will update the American public on the status of testing and our support of state-based testing efforts that are literally expanding by the hour. On the subject of medical supplies, we continue at the President's direction to pursue every means to expand the supply of personal protective equipment for the extraordinary and courageous healthcare workers that are ministering to the needs of people impacted by the coronavirus. We have a policy of procuring, allocating, as well as conserving the resources that we have in our system. And now that the President worked with the Congress to make industrial masks fully available for hospitals to be able to purchase, to be able to use as protective equipment, we're more encouraged than ever about the availability of those important N95 masks to our healthcare facilities. And over this weekend, we'll be announcing a major procurement from the federal government of N95 masks as well. We're also encouraged that we're finding new alternatives to increase the supply of ventilators. We've mentioned that we have a federal stockpile, some 20,000 ventilators on standby, but that doesn't count the tens of thousands of ventilators that are in our healthcare system around the country. But the President has challenged us to work to free up other ventilators from other sources around the country. And there are two different ways that we're doing that. Number one, in our recent discussion with anesthesiologists, we've literally identified tens of thousands of existing ventilators that can be retrofitted and converted to be ventilators for people struggling with the coronavirus. But also, on the President's behalf and behalf of all of our task force, we want to continue to urge every American and every American hospital and healthcare facility to postpone any elective medical procedures. This will free up bed space, free up hospital capacity for people that are struggling with the coronavirus, and it'll also free up equipment that our healthcare workers need. It is inspiring that we continue to receive reports that businesses around America are donating N95 masks to their local hospitals. Businesses large and small are donating hundreds, in some cases millions of N95 masks. And I know how grateful the president is, and we all are. And let me close by saying, as all of our experts have said many times, while the threat of serious illness to the average American from the coronavirus remains low, every American can do your part to reduce the burden on your health, on your family, the burden on our healthcare system, and especially the threat to the most vulnerable among us by putting into practice the president's 15 days to slow the spread. And as the president said at the outset of his remarks, I know that millions of Americans are doing that just now, and the greatness of the American character is shining forth.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
You had a call with Senator Schumer. He says you've now agreed to invoke the Defense Production Act to actually make those medical supplies that hospitals say are in severe shortage. So 2 questions. Is that what you're doing now?
It is. I did it yesterday. We invoked it, I think, the day before. We signed it the evening of the day before. And invoked it yesterday. We have a lot of people working very hard to do ventilators and various other things. Yes.
So you're using it now to tell businesses they need to make ventilators, masks, respirators?
For certain things that we need,
okay.
including some of the very important emergency. I would say ventilators, probably more masks to a large extent. We have millions of masks which are coming and which will be distributed to the states. The states are having a hard time getting them, so we're using the act. The act is very good for things like this. We have millions of masks that we've ordered. They will be here soon. We're having them shipped directly to states.
So you said you were signing this but not invoking it. This is what you said yesterday, and that you would only do so in a worst case scenario. So are we now in a worst case scenario?
We need, no, it's no different other than we need certain equipment that the states are unable to get by themselves. So we're invoking it to use the powers of the federal government to help the states get things that they need, like the masks, like the ventilators. Yes, Steve?
Given what Governor Cuomo has done in New York, is there any more consideration to a national lockdown to keep people in their homes?
I don't think so. Essentially, you've done that in California. You've done that in New York. Those are really 2 hotbeds. Those are probably the 2 hottest of them all in terms of hotspots. I don't think so, because you go out to the Midwest, you go out to other locations, and they're watching it on television, but they don't have the same problems. They don't have, by any means, the same problem. New York, California, Miami, the governor's doing an excellent job. Governor DeSantis in Florida. We have some pretty hot spots in Florida, too. But we're and the state of Washington, of course. But that was largely, if you look at it, it was one nursing home that had problems like you wouldn't believe. So no, we're working with the governors, and I don't think we'll ever find that necessary.
We're about a week into your 15-day guidelines. Are you happy with the progress? Would you like to see?
I am happy. I am happy with it. We'll have to see what the results are at the end of 14 days. Let's say we'll know by the 15th day to see what we do. But I'm certainly honored by the way the American people are working, because it's work. It's work not to work. This is the first time this has ever happened. And we're working out a tremendous financial package for them so they don't work. Who ever heard of this? Usually you work out a financial package to get people working. We're asking people not to work. Social distancing, a new term that's become probably the hottest term there is. So, no, I'm very honored by the way the American people are taking this, I mean, so seriously. Yes, John?
Mr. President, a question for you and a question for Dr. Fauci, if I could. There's been some concern among Democrats on Capitol Hill that the Phase 3 fiscal stimulus is weighted too much in favor of corporations and not enough in terms of individuals. What did your conversations with Senator Schumer yield on that front?
Well, I think that really all of that is being discussed right now. We talked about, as an example, buybacks, stock buybacks. I don't want to have stock buybacks. I don't want people spending... I don't want some executive saying we're going to buy 200,000 shares of stock. I want that money to be used for the workers and also for the company, to keep the company going, but not for buybacks. I haven't spoken to a lot of the Republicans or Democrats on it. We discussed it, and I don't like buybacks. I didn't like them the first time.
Are you and Senator Schumer?
So we're discussing that. We're discussing many things.
Are you on the same page with Senator Schumer?
We're not so far away. I'll tell you, we're not very far away.
And to Dr. Fauci, if I could, Dr. Fauci, as was explained yesterday, there has been some promise with hydroxychloroquine, this potential therapy for people who are infected with coronavirus. Is there any evidence to suggest that, as with malaria, it might be used as a prophylaxis against COVID-19?
No, the answer is no, and the evidence that you're talking about, John, is anecdotal evidence. So as the Commissioner of FDA and the President mentioned yesterday, we're trying to strike a balance between making something with a potential of an effect to the American people available at the same time that we do it under the auspices of a protocol that would give us information to determine if it's truly safe and truly effective. But the information that you're referring to specifically is anecdotal. It was not done in a controlled clinical trial, so you really can't make any definitive statement about it.
I think without seeing too much, I'm probably more of a fan of that than anybody. But I'm a big fan, and we'll see what happens. And we all understand what the doctor said is 100% correct. It's early, but I've seen things that are impressive, and we'll see. We're going to know soon. Including safety. But when you get that safety, this has been prescribed for many years for people to combat malaria, which was a big problem, and it's very effective. It's a strong drug. So we'll see.
Fairly effective against SARS.
It was as I understand that. Is that a correct statement? It was fairly effective on SARS.
John, you've got to be careful when you say fairly effective. It was never done in a clinical trial that compared it to anything. It was given to individuals and felt that maybe it worked. So
was there anything to compare it to?
Well, that's the point. Whenever you do a clinical trial, you do standard of care versus standard of care plus the agent you're evaluating. That's the reason why we showed back in Ebola why particular interventions worked.
Sir, on that topic, about the possible therapies, yesterday, Mr. President, you said that they were for, quote, immediate delivery. Immediate, we heard.
We were ordering, yes, we have millions of units ordered. Bayer is one of the companies, as you know, big company, very big, very great company. Millions of units are ordered, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to be talking to the governors about it, and the FDA is working on it right now. The advantage is that it has been prescribed for a totally different problem, but it has been described for many years, and everybody knows the levels of the negatives and the positives. But I will say that I am a man that comes from a very positive school when it comes to, in particular, one of these drugs, and we'll see how it works out, Peter. I'm not saying it will, but I think that people may be surprised. By the way, that would be a game changer. But we're going to know very soon. But we have ordered millions of units. It's being ordered from Bayer, and there is another couple of companies also that do it.
For clarity, Dr. Fauci said there is no magic drug for coronavirus right now, which you would agree. I guess on this issue,
I think we only disagree a little bit.
Sorry.
I disagree. Maybe and maybe not. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. We have to see. We're going to know.
Is it possible that your impulse to put a positive spin on things may be giving Americans a false sense of hope?
No, I don't think so.
Misrepresenting the preparedness right now.
No, I don't think so. I think that I think it's got
the not yet approved drug.
Such a lovely question. Look, it may work and it may not work. And I agree with the doctor what he said. May work, may not work. I feel good about it. That's all it is, just a feeling. I'm a smart guy. I feel good about it. And we're going to see. You're going to see soon enough. And we have certainly some very big samples of people. If you look at the people, you have a lot of people that are in big trouble. And this is not a drug that obviously, I think I can speak from a lot of experience because it's been out there for over 20 years. So it's not a drug that you have a huge amount of danger with. It's not like a brand new drug that's been just created that may have an unbelievable monumental effect, like kill you. We're going to know very soon. And I can tell you, the FDA is working very hard to get it out. Right now, in terms of malaria, if you want it, you can have a prescription. You get a prescription. And by the way, and it's very effective. It works. I have a feeling you may, and I'm not being overly optimistic or pessimistic, I sure as hell think we ought to give it a try. I mean, there's been some interesting things happened and some good, very good things. Let's see what happens. We have nothing to lose. You know the expression? What the hell do you have to lose? Okay?
So what do you say to Americans who are nearly 200 dead? What do you say to the Americans who are scared, though? I guess nearly 200 dead, 14,000 who are sick, millions, as you witnessed, who are scared right now. What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. I think it's a very nasty question, and I think it's a very bad signal that you're putting out to the American people. The American people are looking for answers, and they're looking for hope. And you're doing sensationalism, and the same with NBC and Comcast. I don't call it Comcast. I call it Concast. Let me just for whom you work. Let me just tell you something. That's really bad reporting. And you ought to get back to reporting instead of sensationalism. Let's see if it works. It might and it might not. I happen to feel good about it, but who knows? I've been right a lot. Let's see what happens, John.
Can I get back to the science and the logistics?
You're going to be ashamed of yourself.
The units that were ordered, are they for clinical trials or are they for distribution to the general patient population?
We are going to, as I understand it, we are going to be taking samples in New York. Governor Cuomo very much is interested in this drug. And they are going to work on it also after they get a certain approval. We're waiting for one final approval from the FDA. We'll see what happens. But we'll use it on people that are not doing great or even at the beginning of not feeling well.
Sort of fall under the...
And John, what do we have to lose?
So this was
Wait, John, it's been out there for so long. We hear good things. Let's see. Maybe it works and maybe it doesn't.
I understand all that. I'm just thinking the application here. So that would be under sort of a modified compassionate access?
We're doing that, I guess, and that's what it's called, yeah. Yes.
I would like Dr. Fauci, if you don't mind, to follow up on what the president is saying. Should Americans have hope in this drug right now? And, sir, I would like to follow up on Peter's question here. Could you please address Americans in this country who are scared right now? This is a very valid concern that people have.
No, there really isn't that much of a difference in many respects with what we're saying. The president feels optimistic about something, his feeling about it. What I'm saying is that it might be effective. I'm not saying that it isn't. It might be effective, but as a scientist, as we're getting it out there, we need to do it in a way as while we are making it available for people who might want the hope that it might work, you're also collecting data that will ultimately show that it is truly effective and safe under the conditions of COVID-19. So there really isn't different. It's just a question of how one feels about it.
Is there any reason to believe it's not safe?
Well, certainly as a drug, any drug, John, has some toxicities. The decades of experience that we have with this drug indicate that the toxicities are rare and they are, in many respects, reversible. What we don't know is when you put it in the context of another disease, whether it's safe. Fundamentally, I think it probably is going to be safe. But I like to prove things first. So it really is a question of not a lot of difference. It's the hope that it will work versus proving that it will work. So I don't see big differences here.
I agree.
Sir, your message to Americans who are working at home, who have their children in their homes right now, who are homeschooling, doctors who say they don't have the masks they need to do their jobs, your message to them?
My message to the American people is that there is a very low incidence of death. You understand that. And we're going to come through this stronger than ever before. If you get it, if you happen to get it, it is highly unlikely. It's looking like it's getting to a number that's much smaller than people originally thought in terms of the ultimate problem, which would be death. My message to the American people is, number one, you've done an incredible job. Incredible what you've gone through. It's been incredible. It wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault. It wasn't the fault of 140 other countries where this has happened. And there is tremendous hope. And I think we're going to come out stronger, better, bigger in every way. I think we're going to be a better country than we were before. And we learned a lot. We learned on reliance, who to rely on, who not to rely on. But our country has been incredible, the way they pulled together, including the fact that I just spoke to Senator Schumer. We had a wonderful conversation. We both want to get to a good solution. But it's been really, for me, watching and seeing people that weren't speaking, getting along well, because we all have one common aim, and that's to get rid of this invisible enemy, get rid of it fast, and then go back to the kind of economy that we had, and maybe even better. Yeah, please, in the back.
Go in the back, please. Mr. President, I have two questions, if you'll indulge me. The first question is, many small businesses are concerned that they have weeks, not months, and are worried about how long it'll take.
We're going to be helping them a lot. We're going to be focused, a big focus, and including my conversation with both Mitch and with Chuck, a big focus of that conversation with small businesses, because they are really the engine behind our country, more so than the big ones. They are the engine behind our country.
Second, if I may, sir, are you concerned about members of Congress that may have used information they learned on updates to sell stocks and profit off of this?
I'm not aware of it. I saw some names. I know all of them. I know everyone mentioned Dianne Feinstein, I guess, and a couple of others. I don't know too much about what it's about, but I find them to all be very honorable people. That's all I know. And they said they did nothing wrong. I find them, the whole group, very honorable people. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, so the whole group would include Richard Burr, the head of the Intelligence Committee, and it also would include Senator Kelly Loeffler. And so the question is whether or not they should be investigated for that behavior.
Well, it also includes Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat. You didn't mention her name. Why didn't you mention her name? And I think she's a very honorable person, by the way. So I'm not saying, but you know, it's interesting that you mention two people, but you don't mention one that happens to be a Democrat.
Any senator, should they be?
I don't know, because I'd have to look at it, possibly, but I find them to be honorable people. Yeah.
You said the other day you see yourself as a wartime president right now, leading the country through this pandemic that we're experiencing. Do you really think, going off on Peter, going off on a network is appropriate when the country is going through something like this?
I do, because I think Peter is, I've dealt with Peter for a long time. And I think Peter is not a good journalist when it comes to fairness.
But he's asking for your message to the country.
Oh, I think it's a good message, because I think that the country has to understand that there is indeed, whether we like it or not, and some of the people in this room won't like it, there's a lot of really great news and great journalism, and there's a lot of fake news out there. And I hear it all, and I see it all, and I understand it all because I'm in the midst of it. So when somebody writes a story or does a story on television, and I know it's false, I know it's fake, and when they say they have 15 sources have said, and I know there's no sources, they're just making it up. I know that, and I call Peter out, but I call other people out too. And, this is time to come together, but coming together is much harder when we have dishonest journalists. It's a very important profession that you're in. It's a profession that I think is incredible. I cherish it. But when people are dishonest, they truly do hurt our country. Yeah, in the back. Please, go ahead.
Mr. President, China has been in communication with the United States and also WHO about coronavirus in January. And the U.S. shut its border to travelers from China on February the 2nd. Also, Wuhan has been in lockdown since January the 24th. And this all happened almost 2 months ago. Why did you still say if you could have known it earlier? And also, you have been calling coronavirus.
Well, I have to say this. We have, and I can speak for myself, but I have a very good relationship with China and with President Xi. I have great respect for President Xi. I consider him to be a friend of mine. It's unfortunate that this got out of control. It came from China. It got out of control. Some people are upset. I know President Xi. He loves China. He respects the United States. And I have to say, I respect China greatly, and I respect President Xi. Okay.
Fact more about stock buybacks. Many of the airlines and Boeing did stock buybacks. Is this a deal breaker for you in this?
No, but I never liked stock buybacks from their standpoint. When we did a big tax cut, and when they took the money and did buybacks, that's not building a hangar. That's not buying aircraft. That's not doing the kind of things that I want them to do. And we're now talking about buybacks. We didn't think we would have had to restrict it because we thought they would have known better. But they didn't know better. In some cases, not in all cases, obviously. Some people did an incredible job. They built plants all over the country. I mean, you'd see what's happened. I mean, we were doing, until this invisible enemy appeared, we never had an economy like this. But there were some companies that used that money to buy back stock, driving up the price of the stock artificially in many cases. I don't like that. I don't like it. And as far as whether or not we'll have that, allow them, when we give them money, because we have to keep these great companies in business because of the workers, frankly, for the most part, because of the workers. The workers are my number one concern. But the way we take care of the workers is we have to keep the companies going. I am fine with restricting buybacks. In fact, I would demand that there be no stock buybacks. I don't want them taking hundreds of millions of dollars and buying back their stock, because that does nothing. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. One for Dr. Fauci, and then hopefully one for you.
Sure. And one thing, Secretary of State Pompeo is extremely busy, so if you have any question for him right now, could you do that? Because you know what I'd like to do? I'd like him to go back to the State Department, or as they call it, the Deep State Department, if you don't mind. I'd like to have him go back and do his job. So does anybody have any question? Please.
Mr. Secretary, can I ask
Yeah, how about you? Only for the Secretary.
The exemptions on work travel, can you define that? Is all work, anyone with a work visa can still cross the border? Can you define the measures that you're taking?
It's a great question. We're working, we're very real concerned about H-2A visas, in particular agricultural workers that need to get across. We're going to make sure that we do everything we can to keep that part of our economic lifeblood working between our two countries. DHS and the State Department will work together. We want to make sure and keep commerce between Canada, the United States, and Mexico alive, functional, and prepared for the day that this economy bounces back like we expect that it will.
Mr. Secretary, the Mexican government has not announced any travel ban on Europe. Where have you been in touch with them as to when they're going to do this and what it is that they're telling you? And then a second question, they also are telling us, and said in a press conference this morning, that they will not take back any Mexican citizen. Any other third parties will have to, we don't know what will happen to them. So can you address what will happen to those third country immigrants that you are saying that will not be allowed to enter the U.S. and Mexico is saying that they will not be allowed to stay in Mexico either or sent back from the U.S.?
But I'll take the first one and then, Chad, I'll give you the second one. With respect to travel into Mexico from outside, I spoke with Foreign Minister Ebrard a couple of times about this. I'm very confident we're going to get to a really good place that protects the Mexican people and the American people from those who might be traveling into places where we've got designations, the Schengen zone from China, so that they're not coming into Mexico and then coming into the United States. I'm very confident we'll do that. We'll make that announcement shortly together.
Mr. Secretary. Again, as we implement the CDC's order, again, we're going to take a number of individuals that cross the border illegally and repatriate them or remove them quickly back to Mexico, back to the Northern Triangle, and back to any other country. So we're going to do that in a rapid fashion. We'll continue to work with Mexico to make sure that Mexican nationals go back, as well as other populations.
But are you sending Guatemalans back to Guatemala or Cubans back to Cuba? What would you do with those third countries that are not Mexicans?
So we're doing all of the above. We're going to be sending, again, individuals back to Mexico, individuals back to the Northern Triangle countries, Cuba, Haiti, all of the, 122 different nations that we see, nationalities that come across that border. We'll be sending them back individually to their countries, but also working with Mexico to send additional populations back there as well.
And just to put it, when you said before, you said non-Mexicans going to Mexico. We're not sending them to Mexico. We're sending them back to their own countries, not to Mexico. Why would Mexico take people that aren't from Mexico? We're sending them back. In the case of Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, a lot of other countries, they go back to the country from where they came. Okay, and Mike, please.
Secretary Pompeo, on the issue of disinformation, is there any particular locus for this disinformation, or is it diffused?
It's pretty diffused, unfortunately, but we've certainly seen it come from places like China and Russia and Iran, where there are coordinated efforts to disparage what America is doing in an activity to do all the things that President Trump has set in motion here.
Other than what you're doing this morning, what are you doing to fight back?
Lots of things, lots of work. One of the things we want to make sure is the American people go to trusted sources for that information. But we've made clear, we've spoken to these countries directly that that they need to knock it off, that we don't approve of it. And then there are a handful of other things we're engaged in to make sure that the right information is out there and accurate information is given. This idea of transparency and accurate information is very important. It's how we protect American people from something like this ever happening again.
Secretary, the Peace Corps volunteers.
You want the American people to be coming to trusted sources of information. Does it undermine you at all when the president stands up here and he attacks news outlets calling us untrustworthy?
Somebody else have a question?
Mr. Secretary, the Peace Corps volunteers have the Peace Corps volunteers.
Please. In terms of Americans who find themselves stranded in places where there are no longer flights to get back to the United States, what efforts are being made to help them?
I appreciate that question. So we're doing lots of things. We've had a couple places in particular, Peru and Morocco. I think we've had the first 2, maybe 3 now flights out of Morocco. We're going to work to get people back. We're urging individuals when they can get back on their own. They traveled there on their own. When they can get back there on their own, they ought to try to do that. But we have a team stood up at the State Department, the Repatriation Task Force, that is working each of these instances. So we've heard from individuals, members of Congress. We're trying to get Americans back from these places where air travel has been disrupted. And we'll get that done over time. We'll get it done successfully.
Do you have any sense of how big that problem is? Is there any sense of how big that problem is? How many people?
We don't know the full scale of it yet, but we think we have the largest number identified, and we're working. If there are those who are watching that are someplace, and you can go on the State Department website. You can log into, I think it's step.gov. You can go STEP and log in, and we'll track it, and we'll try to get everybody back just as best we can.
Secretary, how long are these border restrictions likely to last along the south and north borders?
They'll last as long as we need to do it to protect the American people from the virus. I couldn't tell you how long it's going to last.
We have you determined whether Iran is responsible for that rocket attack week?
So
maybe we shouldn't say that.
So let me just get back to you on the answer to that. And what we can say with certainty is this: we've made clear all along that the Iraqi Shia militias are funded, trained, equipped by the Iranians. And we've urged the Iranians not to do that, and we've told the Iranians that they will be held responsible for those attacks when they threaten American lives.
The Peace Corps volunteers that are in 60-plus countries, have they all been returned?
I don't know if they're all back or not yet. I know that they were directed to come back. I know that most of them are back. I couldn't tell you if we have all of them back yet.
And then Secretary Esper's not here, but to get tests to the troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, are you able to give us a progress report on the status of that, if they're able to get tests?
I don't know the answer to that. I know we have State Department officials, too, who are concerned, want to make sure we get them tests. Our team as well, and we're working on that. We've had significant success on that to date. There are a few places we've not been able to get them, but we will. We'll get them there.
Secretary Pompeo, how exactly are you going to get those Americans back, and do you have any plans to get the military involved in that?
We're going to use all the tools we can. These first efforts are combined commercial, private flights that will fly in, bring them back to a destination here in the United States. So we'll do that. There are some that will travel back other ways as well. And we've worked with the Department of Defense to say where there is space available, we'll be able to bring them back on those flights as well. It's a whole government effort to make sure we get them back. They're going to help us every place they can. Secretary Nesbitt, I've talked about it a couple times.
Thank you, Secretary. Question on Iran again. Is there any consideration to relax some sanctions on Iran during the coronavirus crisis instead of being particularly hard hit?
That's an important question. The whole world should know that humanitarian assistance into Iran is wide open. It's not sanctioned. We've offered to provide assistance to the Iranians as well. I talked with Dr. Tedros from the World Health Organization about this. We're doing everything we can to facilitate both the humanitarian assistance moving in and to make sure that financial transactions connected to that can take place as well. There is no sanction on medicines going to Iran. There's no sanctions on humanitarian assistance going into that country. They've got a terrible problem there, and we want that humanitarian medical healthcare assistance to get to the people of Iran.
But the sanctions themselves, no movement.
We are working to do all the things we've had in place for the first 3 years here to deliver security for the American people.
They know the answer. Iran. They know the answer. Iran. The leaders. They know the answer to your question.
Wasn't it appropriate for the president to call your department the Deep State Department at a time when thousands of diplomats are working very hard around the world to combat this pandemic?
Worked with the president for 3 years now. I know how much he values the people that work on my team. I know when I was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency how much he valued the work we did. I know that he watches our team, Dr. Burks, all the team that's working to push back against this virus, to keep America safe. I know how much he values them.
What a good answer. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. President, can I ask a question? Mr. President?
Very true, too. Go ahead.
Mr. President?
No, behind you.
I apologize.
Please, go ahead.
I have 2 questions. The first is to Secretary Pompeo.
the news hours learned that the CDC picked up that there was some sort of virus happening in Wuhan, the coronavirus happening in Wuhan as early as December. When did the CDC start letting other agencies know that there was something in China happening, that this coronavirus was happening? And then when did the whole government approach start to happen?
So I'll let the CDC or Dr. Fauci, you want to talk to that? Dr. Secretary Azar, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so we were alerted by some discussions that Dr. Redfield, the director of the CDC, had with Chinese colleagues on January 3rd. It's since been known that there may have been cases in December, not that we were alerted in December.
And then, Mr. President, the other question I have for you.
Excuse me, we'll do it in a second. Let Mike, yes,
may I just add one more thing? There's been some discussion about China and what they knew and when they knew it, and I've been very critical. We need to know immediately. The world is entitled to know. The Chinese government was the first to know of this risk to the world, and that puts a special obligation to make sure that the data gets to our scientists, our professionals. This is not about retribution. This matters going forward. We're in a live exercise here to get this right. We need to make sure that even today, the data sets that are available to every country, including data sets that are available to the Chinese Communist Party, are made available to the whole world. It's an imperative to keep people safe. We talk about the absence of data sets, not being able to make judgments about what to do. This is absolutely critical. This transparency, this real-time information sharing isn't about political games or retribution. It's about keeping people safe. And so when you see a delay in information flowing from the Chinese Communist Party to the technical people who we wanted to get into China immediately to assist in this, every moment of delay connected to being able to identify this the risk vectors, creates risk to the people all around the world. And so this is why it's not about blaming someone for this. This is about moving forward to make sure that we continue the information we need to do our jobs.
Mr. Secretary, what message do you think it sends to other countries when you have the President of the United States lashing out at reporters?
I've had my frustration with reporters too. All I ask when I talk to the media is that you listen to what we say and report it accurately, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating when you see that doesn't happen. It's enormously frustrating. We have a responsibility to tell the American people the truth, and those who are reporting on what it is we're doing and saying have an equal responsibility to report accurately.
What message does it send to countries when you're flashing out at reporters?
Being reported that the news media.
I've seen many things at the State Department be reported wildly inaccurately on multiple occasions, and I have spoken to those reporters about it each and every time, and I will continue to do so.
Mr. President, Senator Johnson has suggested...
Well, I'd rather have, if you could, finish up with the Secretary of State.
I think I've worn him out, Mr. President.
Is everybody finished, Secretary of State?
Let me ask you both, if that's all right. Mr. Secretary, Senator Johnson has suggested that you and the administration may be overreacting. He said, we don't shut down our economy because tens of thousands of people die on the highways. We don't shut down our economies because tens of thousands of people die from the common flu. At worst, 3.4% of Americans will die from this virus, he said. What do you say to people that have that view? That's 11 million people he's talking about.
Well, I can just say the entire world is agreeing with us because they all have their choice, and everybody's doing the exact same thing. We want to shut it out, and we can do that. And we'll see what happens in 2 weeks and 3 weeks. But if we can save thousands of lives, and even millions of lives potentially, you don't know where it goes, but you could be talking about millions of lives. So if you look at the world, I mean, you have some very smart people in the world, you have some smart leaders in the world, and everybody's doing it the way we're doing it. I think we're doing a better job than hopefully most, if not all. We're doing a very effective job, but we'll know better in 14 or 15 days. But, you know, you're talking about hundreds of thousands, and maybe more than that, numbers of people. And, you know, we can bring our finances back very quickly. We can't bring the people back.
Mr. President, to follow up on that, there are millions of people out there that share that view, that say, I don't really need to shut things down. I don't really need to stay away from stores. I can go to the beach. And those people making multiple actions exponentially, it's the difference between life and death.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think I'd like to have Anthony answer that, because to be honest, that's what he does, and we had a lot of very talented people telling us what they think we should do.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I think that's a false equivalency to compare traffic accidents with. I mean, that's totally way out. That's really a false equivalency. When you have something that is new and it's emerging, and you really can't predict totally the impact it's going to have, and you take a look at what's gone on in China, and you see what's going on right now in Italy, and what's happening in New York City, I don't think with any moral conscience you could say, why don't we just let it rip and happen and let X percent of the people die? I don't understand that reasoning at all.
Okay, so Secretary of State will be leaving. Any other question? Go ahead in the back, please. In the back for Mike.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Excuse me, I didn't call on you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two things. In New York, where cases are doubling every day, they fear that supplies are going to run out in a matter of weeks. Yesterday, Mayor Bill de Blasio called on you to mobilize the military to deliver urgent supplies. Yesterday he said, quote, "The fate of New York City rests in the hands of one man. He is a New Yorker, and right now he is betraying the city he comes from." I've personally spoken to emergency department nurses who say that they're being told not to wear N95 masks because supplies are so low. So how do you respond to those remarks by Mayor de Blasio?
Well, I just think this.
I'm looking to you. When will supplies arrive?
I'm not dealing with him. I'm dealing with the governor, and the governor agrees with me, and I agree with him. So far, we've been very much in sync. I guess they're not agreeing with each other necessarily, but the relationship with New York, I love New York. I grew up in New York, as you probably have heard, and the relationship's been very good. And I think government and the governor have been getting along incredibly well with the federal government. Okay.
Question for Secretary Wolf, if I could. Just on illegal entries of people who are OTM, how will the turnback process work? Will they be taken to a common area and then put on a plane and sent back to northern countries or others? I mean, how would that process work?
Again, it's a public health crisis. So what we're trying to do is limit the amount of contact that we have with these individuals, not putting them in Border Patrol facilities, ICE detention facilities, and the like. So it's going to be very rapid. We're going to obviously take them into custody and then send them back to a port of entry or other means. So it'll be very quickly. It won't be the 6 or 7 or 10 days that we currently have. It'll be much more rapid.
But if they are OTM, will they be taken to an airfield nearby? Or?
That's correct.
And sent back home?
Absolutely.
Anybody?
Mr. President, can we ask Mr. President, the checks to Americans, the bill as proposed creates sort of tiers of checks for incomes. Do you believe philosophically that makes sense?
Well, I believe in a lot of things. I want to get workers' money, and whichever way, the best way to get it. And I want to keep the businesses open too, because without the businesses, they're not going to be getting money for very long. But we're going to be talking.
As it's written, is there enough, or do you want to see it juiced up?
We'll do something later. I'm sure. I'm sure.
Mr. President, the Wall Street analysts are predicting that unemployment numbers could skyrocket next week. By some analysts, say as many as 3 million people applying for unemployment, which would be a historic number in a 1 week spread. So is a $1,000 check going to cut it? Is that going to be?
We're not talking about a $1,000 check. We're talking about much more than that. We're also talking about doing phases. If this doesn't work, we're going to keep doing until we get it going. And frankly, once we get the economy back, and once this enemy is defeated, the invisible enemy as I call it, once it's defeated, we get the economy back, it's going to all come back to us very quickly. It comes back very quickly. We have a tremendous economy. We do numbers like no other country has ever done before. Number 1 in the world, if you go back 2 weeks, and still obviously, but if you go back 2 weeks, number 1 in the world by far. That money comes back to us very rapidly. We want to keep it. We want to have it so that when we, not if, but when we win the war with the invisible enemy, when we win it, these companies can immediately start. Not that they have to start rebuilding, which takes a long time. Steve?
Are you confident that those are jobs that will come back? Someone applies for unemployment next week?
What projections for job losses in March and April are you hearing? Well, we're looking at different numbers. We have a best case and a not best case, but the big thing is to defeat the virus. Once that virus is defeated, Steve, I think everything else falls in place very rapidly. I think you're going to have a tremendous upswing. A lot of people agree with me. If you look at your stock market geniuses, and some of whom are not geniuses, but they think they are. A lot of people think that I'm right about that, that once we defeat the virus, I think you're going to have a very steep, like a rocket ship, it's going to go up, and everything will be back. And I really believe we're going to be stronger than ever before. Yeah, go ahead.
On the issue of supplies, you've told governors to try to find whatever supplies they can on their own. But some of them are now saying when they go to try to buy them, they're being outbid by the federal government.
Well, you heard my news conference yesterday.
So what do you expect those governors to do?
That was sort of yesterday's news. No, that does happen because they want to buy supplies. We want to buy as a backup to them in case they can, and sometimes that will happen. But regardless of who gets them, when they need them, we're getting them to them. Now, we're doing the Production Act. We're doing it very much, and we have a lot of things cooking right now at a high level. Remember this. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Over 140 countries. And you have supply chains that are broken down for two reasons. Because they can't supply that much and because people are sick. And they can't be on the chain. So you have a lot of interesting things all over the world. You have supply chains that broke down because of the illness and also because of the fact, the quantity. But we're getting it ordered. We're getting it done. And if you just have to, look, some of you were at the call yesterday where I spoke with the governors, almost all of the governors, and every one of them was very impressed with what we've done. Go ahead, in the middle, please.
There are reports saying that the Labor Department has told states not to disclose their unemployment numbers. Do you agree with that decision?
I'd have to talk to him. I would have to talk to him.
Just one more clarifying question, if I could. On the DPA, I just want to be clear. Are you saying that the administration is requiring these industries to create these products or just asking?
So far we haven't had to. It's an amazing thing that happened. We're getting calls from automobile companies. We're getting calls from other companies saying they have plant capacity. They want to make ventilators. They want to make other things. We are literally being besieged in a beautiful way by companies that want to do the work. They want to do the job. They want to help us. They want to help our country. So we haven't had a problem with that at all.
President, how do you help out states and localities that are trying to bid on things like ventilators and other items that are being outbid by the
Well, when they call us, they let us know. If there's a conflict, they will call us and we will drop our bid because we want them to go first because their point of sale. So we've had 4 or 5 instances where literally that was happening because, we're both trying to get stock. And if we're going against, they will call us. The smart ones, frankly, will call us, and we will immediately, we want them to buy it because it gets to them quicker if they buy it. Okay?
Do they know that
we're really there? They know that, and it's happening more and more where they're calling and they're saying we're bidding against each other. They want to get it. They'll get it much quicker that way. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, this is a question for Secretary Azar. There are labs across the country that don't have the testing supplies they need. What specific actions is the administration taking?
I tell you what.
What specific actions?
We inherited an obsolete deal, and we've made a good thing out of it. I haven't heard that question in a while, but go ahead.
Yeah, so first, we're making tremendous progress in terms of lab testing. Tens of thousands of tests are being done every single day, both through the CDC and the public health labs, as well as now through the private sector commercial labs. They're getting to scale. They have supplies. They have high throughput. We do hear anecdotally occasionally of, say, a public health lab or another one that has a concern about this supply or that supply. Through FEMA, we actually are standing up a laboratory task force to answer those questions. Usually it's that the lab people do not understand that there are actually alternative supplies in the marketplace that they are perfectly free to use. We've actually had to put out some common myths and truths about that. For instance, the other day, we were getting calls from governors saying, we don't have swabs, there are no swabs, there are no swabs. Our supply people went in the open marketplace and bought 200,000 swabs in the open market, and I just sent a letter to every governor sending them swabs. So some of it's just they aren't listening or checking with us about all the freedom, all the capacities out there. It's a complex system with 330 million Americans and all of these labs. So sometimes there's a lab that doesn't understand how much flexibility they have and how much supply there is out there. And we're working through the new FEMA Integration Center to help correct that for folks.
Secretary Azar.
Well, as I said, more and more tests are being performed every day. And as we learn about the results that are being reported around the country of coronavirus tests, our experts continue to look at the numbers and see that some 90% of Americans that are tested do not test positive for the coronavirus. And so it can give you a sense of the magnitude of testing that's going on. We have the number of cases that we've reported today, but it's in some cases near to 10 times that have been tested. But let me also emphasize how important it was in answering these questions for governors and local officials that the president stood up FEMA and the National Response Center, where we briefed governors yesterday. Now, every governor and their state health departments have the ability to reach out to our regional FEMA administrators. And that's how, as the president said, we're sorting out those potential conflicts between very significant federal purchases and procurements and as hospitals and state governments are purchasing as well. I think the new streamlined system operating now in all 50 states and our territories of governors and states going through their regional administrator for FEMA is going to make it more possible for us to ensure that our hospitals, our healthcare providers have access to what's available on the open market and elsewhere.
Mr. Vice President, you're the head of the task force. You've seen the numbers. You've spoken to average Americans. You're a former governor. What do you say to Americans right now who are watching and who are scared?
I would say do not be afraid, be vigilant. All the experts tell us that the risk of serious illness to the average American for the coronavirus is low. But we need every American to put into practice the president's coronavirus guidelines, 15 days to slow the spread, because the coronavirus is about 3 times more contagious than the flu, according to our best estimate. And you can contract the coronavirus, have very mild symptoms, if any, not even be aware that you have it, and expose someone who is vulnerable to a very serious health outcome. That's the reason why we're encouraging people to avoid groups of more than 10, to not eat in restaurants, but to use drive-thrus, to wash their hands on a regular basis. And particularly, we're going to continue, as the president has directed us, to focus on the most vulnerable population, which are seniors with serious underlying health conditions or anyone with an underlying immunodeficiency. It's those people we need to care for, but it's going to take all of us working together to make sure they're safe.
Mr. Vice President, ventilators, Mr. Vice President? Because you just said that you haven't had to require companies to up their production of medical supplies, but you said last night you invoked the DPA.
When we need something, because of the act, when we need something, we order something. And as you know, 2 days ago, I invoked the act, which was a big step. I'm not sure that it had been done before, certainly not very much. And when we need something, we will use the act. What has happened is, before we even go out, many companies, great companies in a totally different business are willing to do things and make things, because that's what they do. They make product. They're willing to make product for us, medical product, that we need very badly for the states, that the states can't get. They haven't been able to get. And, you know, most of the states, in no way did they do anything wrong. They were stocked up. They were all equipped. Unfortunately, they've never had a thing like this. So they need help from the federal government.
But you haven't actually directed any this is important. You haven't actually directed any companies to start making more ventilators or masks.
I have, yes. I have. A lot. And they're making a lot of ventilators, and they're making a lot of masks. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Mr. President, partially following up on that, are there automakers right now who are retooling their production facilities to make ventilators or
I can't say they are, but they will be very shortly, because we're working with one in particular that wants to make ventilators. They called us yesterday, and we're working on a transaction. They're going to make ventilators. They say they've done it before, which surprised me, but they can do it very easily.
This is partially for you, partially for Secretary Azar. You said yesterday that you had spoken to Carnival Corporation's chairman. Yes, and he said that he could donate some ships.
No, not donate. That's not the word donate.
Okay, blend.
He's not giving them. He's going to let you use them.
Okay.
I spoke with Mickey Harrison, who's the president, chairman, CEO.
Okay.
And owner.
And he could lend some ships to potentially be hospitals.
He said to me that he was willing to, if we need ships for helping people, that Carnival would be absolutely willing to help us in Los Angeles, in New York, wherever they may be, in Miami, where they're very big. If we needed something, they would be willing to. So far, we haven't needed to, and we're bringing the big hospital ships up in California. We're working with the governor of California, as you know, with Gavin, and we haven't made a determination. We're also talking to folks who would like it in Seattle, so we're discussing where it can be most useful. We've spoken with Governor Cuomo, and we're bringing the big hospital ship up in 2 weeks, and we're going to have it in New York Harbor, someplace in New York Harbor.
So my question is, one, it sounds like you haven't taken them up on it yet, but
no, I have taken them up. I said if we need it, I'll let you know.
Okay.
That's called taking them up.
And secondly,
right now we don't need it.
Ships have a lot of frequently contacted surfaces, and so this is where you come in, Secretary Azar, or potentially Dr. Fauci. Do you have concerns about the cruise ships being used as hospitals?
Well, I can tell you they're very clean, and also those surfaces, the germ, as you know, the virus disappears over a period of time, and these ships are very clean. They've been kept very clean. They've been gone over, but the virus, as you know, if it's on a surface for certain, they have actually charts, different kinds of surfaces, it disappears over a period of time.
Why not just use hotels?
What are you trying to get at? Go ahead.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Why not just use
disappears.
hotels?
The virus disappears when it's on surface after a certain number of days, or in some cases hours, depending on the surface it's in.
Thank you. A quick follow-up. So can you name any of the companies that you've asked to start making these ventilators or face masks?
I will be, but first I want to get the approval from the company, because I don't want to be doing that.
Okay. Well,
I assume they'd like it, but I'll let you know.
Okay. Well, thank you. And this is for Dr. Fauci.
One company that has openly stated it is General Motors.
So that's one of the, did the government ask General Motors?
I didn't speak to them about announcing it, but I'll announce it. I'm sure they wouldn't be, but we have others also.
Okay, thank you. And so for Dr. Fauci, there's new research out that the CDC has released that many of the people that 13% of the people with the coronavirus got it from someone that was asymptomatic. So my question is, does that change the way the approach that should be taken? And do you think that's the case, or do you think that, or do you not agree with that research?
The recommendations that are here applies to whether you're in physical contact with someone who could be infected with symptoms versus asymptomatic. I don't really think it changes anything. Certainly there is some degree of asymptomatic transmissibility. It's still not quite clear exactly what that is. But when people focus on that, I think they take their eye off the real ball, which is the things you do will mitigate against getting infected, no matter whether you're near someone who is asymptomatic or not. It's the same thing. Physical separation and the care that's outlined here is going to take care of both of those things.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question about testing. When will every American who needs a test get a test and be able to get a test? And why not have medical equipment being shipped right now to hospitals who need it?
You're hearing very positive things about testing, and just so you understand, we don't want every American to go out and get a test. 350 million people. We don't want that. We want people that are that have a problem, that have a problem with they're sneezing, they're sniffling, they don't feel good, they have a temperature. There are a lot of different things. You know them better than I do. So ready? We don't need that. But what we are having is we're having these private labs have come in. They've been really fantastic. And we also have a great system for the future. Because as I said, we inherited, meaning this administration, an obsolete, broken system that wasn't meant for anything like this. Now we have a system that you can see, because look, we're well into this and nobody's even talking about it except for you, which doesn't surprise me.
There are Americans, though, who say that they have symptoms and they can't get tests.
Well, okay.
What do you say to the Americans who are
I'm not hearing it. But we don't want everybody to go out and get a test, because there's no reason for it. Yeah.
Americans who have symptoms.
We'll do one more after this.
So I want to ask Dr.
Dr. Fauci, because Kevin Hassett is one of the people who is now suggesting that the real way to get to the end of this, for life to return to normal, is for every single person living in this country to be tested. That way you could see who's contagious, and you could then have people who don't have it go back to work. Is there any possibility that this country could ever get to a point where every single person could be tested, and how long would that take?
Thank you for the question. I've heard that before. I don't connect the dots there. I don't see how testing everybody in the country is going to help you to implement this. This should be implemented universally, at least at this level for everyone. The things we spoke about a while ago, that you want to really ratchet it up, like Governor Newsom is doing in California, like Governor Cuomo is doing in New York, or how you put an end to this outbreak. Testing is important. It would be nice to know, and there are certain things you could do, but let's not conflate testing with the action that we have to take. Whether or not you test, do this. I'm not putting down testing as an important issue, but people seem to link them so much that if you don't have universal testing, you can't respond to the outbreak. You really can.
But I do think, and that's after listening to Tony and everybody else that's an expert, I do think it's important that not everybody be tested. If you feel great and if you have no symptoms whatsoever, it's just not a good thing to be doing. All right, Steve?
A question for Dr. Fauci. Yesterday you mentioned the possibility of aerosol transmission of the virus. How likely is that to happen?
The possibility of aerosol transmission always comes up when you have situations like that. It comes up with influenza. It came up with SARS, in which there was a documented, one-off episode of some aerosol transmission. Aerosol means that it can stay in the air for a period of time because it's in a droplet that's very small and doesn't go down. Is it possible that there is aerosol transmission? Yeah, it certainly is. But clearly, what we have seen in the situations where people have gotten infected from the areas that we have experienced, China, South Korea, now Europe, most of it is in a situation where people are close enough to each other that a symptomatic person will have a real droplet transmission. So I'm not ruling out the possibility that it's aerosol. But again, it's not going to substantially change doing this.
Dr. Fauci, a quick follow-up on the testing issue. Let me just ask this in a very simple way. What is the demand pressure on testing in this country, and are we meeting it?
I get the same calls that many of you get, that someone goes into a place who has a symptom and wants to get a test, and for one reason or other, multiple logistic, technical, what have you, they can't get it. That is a reality that is happening now. Is it the same as it was a few weeks ago? Absolutely not, because as the Secretary and others have said, right now that we have the private sector involved, the availability, not only just availability, but the implementation of the availability is getting better and better and better. Having said that, I understand and empathize with the people who rightfully are saying, I'm trying to get a test and I can't.
So is that a way of saying we are not yet at a point where we are meeting the demand pressure?
Well, the answer is yes, John. We are not there yet, because otherwise people would be never calling up saying they can't get a test.
Well, I just can't emphasize enough about the incredible progress that we have made on testing. All of your reporting and media outlets around the country are as well, that many more tests are being performed every day, literally by the tens of thousands. And this has only been made possible because several weeks ago the president brought in the commercial labs, these enormous companies, Quest and LabCorp, working with companies like Roche and Abbott Laboratories and Thermo Fisher, and said, we have this existing system of state laboratories and the CDC processing tests for certain infections. But given the magnitude of this outbreak, the president apprehended early on that it wouldn't be enough to meet the need. And I just want every American to know that literally hour by hour, in partnership with these extraordinary commercial labs, we are making more and more tests available every day. We'll detail the way that we're working with states to distribute those tests. We've obviously focused on states that have been dealing with the most serious outbreaks of coronavirus, Washington State, California, New York, and others. We've been making sure the tests are in those areas, working closely with those governors. But I think the American people should be encouraged at the progress that we are making. Tomorrow we'll take some time to detail that progress for you, but I would say to any American who might be concerned that they have symptoms, as the President said so well, we don't want every healthy American to get a test. But if people feel that they have symptoms that they identify with the coronavirus, call your doctor. Their doctor can call their state health authorities that can work very closely with our entire team through HHS and FEMA and work to identify the more and more tests that are available every day.
So you know, just for the probably 100th time, this administration, inherited an obsolete, broken, old system that wasn't meant for this. We discarded that system, and we now have a new system that can do millions of people as you need them. But we had to get rid of a broken old system that didn't work. It worked only on a very limited basis. And we're very proud of what we've done. It's incredible what we've done. And this system will now serve for the future, for future problems. Hopefully you don't have a problem like this, but something will come up. We have now a great system, and it's almost fully in gear, but it's able to test millions of people. But we inherited a broken, old, frankly, a terrible system. We fixed it, and we've done a great job. And we haven't been given the credit that we deserve, that I can tell you. But the one that really deserves the credit are the American people, because they are doing things that nobody thought they would do. What they're doing is incredible, and we're making a lot of progress, and we'll see you folks tomorrow. Thank you very much.
His daily coronavirus briefing for the press. It was an expansive briefing with the full coronavirus team there. Lots of issues being discussed. President says he is not considering a national lockdown, but he is going to suspend all non-essential travel from Mexico. And in terms of some of those aid bills, buyback limits could be built into those aid bills, the president says. And the federal student loan payments will be suspended for 60 days. So just a couple of the headlines there. We'll have more for you coming up. This is Bloomberg.
This is WBBR New York, WDCH-FM Bowie, Baltimore, Washington, WJZ-FM HD2 Catonsville, WRCA Watertown, WBOS HD2 Brookline, Boston, WNBP Newburyport, KNEW Oakland, KOSF 103.7 FM HD2 San Francisco, and SiriusXM Satellite Radio Channel 119.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Doug Prisner. It is 1:25 on Wall Street. We have a mixed picture for the equity market. We'll talk more about that in a moment. We just heard from President Trump. Among the items that he addressed, he has invoked the Defense Production Act. And in that question and answer session with members of the press, the president indicated that he has directed certain companies to begin producing medical supplies and healthcare equipment. This is a way of addressing the shortages at hospitals across the country. Now, at the same time, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was saying that he wants to pass a massive stimulus by Monday. The legislation is expected to top $1 trillion. Even so, U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin was saying the GOP bill is too small, and he wants broader cash payments. Earlier today, the Fed, along with some key central banks, announced a coordinated effort to beef up dollar liquidity swap lines. This is another move designed to keep dollar liquidity ample around the world. Seems like everybody wants cash and wants to be in dollars. Right now we have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index down about 0.4%, indicating the dollar has weakened against the majors. The Fed also expanding its money market operations to include some municipal debt. So you see, member banks would be permitted now to use short-term muni paper as collateral at the Fed for short-term funding needs. Volume today in the equity market very heavy. This is primarily due to the expiration of options and futures contracts. Right now, looks like about $9.6 billion has traded in the equity market. nearly double the 30-day average. We've got a big drop in crude oil. WTI down 6.5%. We're trading 23.57. Even so, energy stocks pushing to the upside with the S&P Energy Group up about 0.9%. Dow higher by 0.7%. The S&P, check that, the Dow is now down 1%. S&P is weaker by 1.2%. NASDAQ turning negative now with a loss of about 0.4%. U.S. 10-year Treasury now with a yield of 93 basis points. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Paul Sweeney.
Doug Kirshner, thank you so much for that update. We appreciate it. Detailed as always. Lots of news coming out today, of course, in that long press conference held by the coronavirus task force headed by Vice President Mike Pence. President Donald Trump was there. A lot of news there. Let's get a sense of kind of how things are going in the healthcare community. How is a healthcare community actually dealing with just an incredibly growing pandemic? Joshua Sharfstein, he's a Vice Dean for Public Health Practice and Community Engagement at Johns Hopkins. Professor, thanks so much for joining us. Just trying to get a sense, give us your sense of how you think the U.S. healthcare system is bearing under this growing weight of the coronavirus.
Well, there are a few different dimensions. The biggest, most important one is on, the scale of the response and whether there's room for patients and whether the healthcare workers can protect themselves. So far, there has been room for patients, but we are very much stretching the capacity in certain parts of the country, and the epidemic continues to grow. So I'd say there's very high fear for exceeding the capacity, particularly in areas that are getting hit hard, and then in other areas as the epidemic grows there. And then the other major issue is the protective equipment for those workers. I mean, we're not that far into this, and we have reports of, people reusing gowns and masks, not wearing the types of masks that they'd like to during certain kinds of procedures. All things we'd really ideally never see, we're already seeing, and we're really just at the beginning. So many warnings from hospitals that they're days away from running out of protective equipment, and even these stories of the hospitals sort of mobilizing to make their own equipment, which is kind of astonishing. So, I would say this is a moment of kind of bracing for impact within the healthcare system.
Yeah, interesting. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has been really, really upfront about calling out the need for, additional beds and the strains that are going to be put on the New York healthcare system, particularly calling out, just the need for hospital beds. And I know that the ship Comfort from the United States government is being sent to New York. Is that kind of one of the first areas where we're going to see a pinch? Will be literally just on the number of beds available?
It's one of the first areas. The first area we're going to see a pinch, and we're seeing it, is on protective equipment. And that is not good, because if there are healthcare workers that get sick, that'll undermine the ability to staff those beds. Not to mention just the injustice of having healthcare workers getting sick because they don't have the appropriate equipment. So I think this is more than just the first sign. That is the sign. I mean, right now we're shutting down because we don't want the healthcare system to get overwhelmed, and we're going to have to be watching it very carefully to see, how it manages.
So, Doctor, just give us a sense of maybe kind of your best case understanding in the healthcare community about timing. How long do you think this is going to continue to be a growth story in terms of number of patients? I know people talk a lot about flattening the curve. What's your best guess at the moment?
Well, it really depends on the area and what's being done. I mean, if there's all kinds of beach parties in a particular area, I think you can expect that we're not in the process of flattening the curve there. Other areas which are really clamping down, I think they're hoping that in the next few weeks they'll start to see, certainly they'll start to beat the estimates of how many cases there could be. But it's pretty early to see how well this is working. And it's very, very frustrating that delay in testing has harmed the ability to really have a really good sense of what's going on out there. So we're a little bit in the dark. We're doing everything we can, and then we're going to really see over the next few weeks whether we're able to flatten the curve.
Do you have confidence that, I guess this is really a question for a hospital supply expert, but do you have confidence that the industry can ramp up and try to get those critical safeguards for the healthcare professionals, as well as the ventilators and the beds and all these things?
I don't know whether the healthcare industry can do it alone at this point, and that's why I think you see these efforts to try to enlist other industries across the world. So, I mean, I think this is beyond just the healthcare system's requirement to respond. And I think that's a general point. I mean, look at what's happening to the economy. This is beyond the usual capability of any system to deal with. The public health system, the healthcare system, like everyone doesn't just have to do their role at home, but every business has to be thinking about how they could potentially contribute.
Interesting. So, Doctor, is there things to learn from China or maybe Italy? I'm thinking people that are farther along in the curve. Are there some good takeaways that we should apply here to the U.S.?
That these measures really matter, that we've got to be serious about them, and that the quicker we can stand up a strong public health response, the better. And that this isn't a drill. I mean, that's what we learned from both China and Italy, but particularly Italy, which in many ways is a more similar society to ours, that we can really have a devastating situation here, and we have to act like that's a real possibility.
Professor, is there any give us your thoughts about how a potential vaccine may play out here? I mean, I know there's a couple things in the works, maybe repurposing some existing vaccines. What is your take?
For a few reasons, the vaccine probably not in the short term, but I think there are studies coming out. There was a study that didn't show a big effect in the really any effect in the New England Journal this week, but for an antiviral. So medications, I think, are probably better in the short term. The other idea that's out there is to use the antibodies from people who've recovered and to give to people both for prevention and treatment. We have a podcast, Public Health on Call, where I interviewed Dr. Arturo Casadevall talking about that strategy, an immunologist at the School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins, and Hopkins is trying to stand up a study on this very quickly. And, hopefully there'll be some things that are proven to work relatively quickly that can at least blunt the impact at the high level, if not, really fundamentally alter the course of the epidemic.
What do we know, if anything, about the ability to have this virus return? So if someone's had it once, it could come back at a later time. Or if we kind of get through this pandemic here, maybe in the summer, we have to worry about it again in the fall and winter. Any data on that?
There are some examples of people who've been diagnosed twice, but it's not clear whether they really had it the first time or the second time, I think, is what some people are saying about that. It is possible to get coronavirus infection when it's a common cold more than once. But I think in general, the sense is that we're facing the worst of it right up front because we're all susceptible. The speed of transmission is therefore so fast, and our bodies are totally naive to it. So there's, it's possible other things might happen, but it's, being exposed to something once generally helps you the second time. We can't say for sure because we don't know, but I think that it's the here and now that's the issue. As far as does it go away? Does it come back? It's too early to say.
Interesting. Too bad. We'll have to look at that issue as well. Joshua Sharfstein, Vice Dean for Public Health Practice and Community Engagement at Johns Hopkins. Thanks so much for joining us. Just want to get a sense of what's going on in the markets. We've had a lot of volatility in the markets today. We swinging back and forth on the equity indices. Let's get the latest. We welcome Katie Greifeld, Bloomberg Markets and ETFs reporter. Katie, thanks so much for joining us. Again, we have red on the screen here as I look at my equity screen. What have you been seeing today?
Well, I think when you heard from Cuomo that New York would follow California in effectively shutting down, that was just a reminder that, the measures that states and the country that they'll have to take to contain this virus are probably going to crimp economic growth in the process. You're probably going to see a big drop off in spending. The consumer's going to be hit, and they've really been a pillar of the economy. So I think that's percolating through the market right now, especially as we head into a weekend where, typically investors have been de-risking, selling off equities a little bit into the Friday close.
Yeah, and we have the quadruple witching today, so there'll be some volume and some volatility associated with that. Katie, is there a sense in the marketplace that the government, in terms of fiscal stimulus, is doing enough, or does it need to move even faster?
I think it's getting to that point. I mean, this time last week, you really had markets basically screaming for fiscal stimulus. We had seen the Fed start to move, but they've really stepped up in a big way. And I think that there's a level of comfort now that the government and the monetary authorities are working together to try to blunt the economic impact. But of course, there's this understanding that that's not the driver here. There needs to be a flattening of the curve. The number of cases and the number of deaths needs to come down before markets will truly take a breath and be able to move past this. But there is, again, a level of comfort in all that's coming from the fiscal and the monetary side.
So I know there's been some concerns building, particularly in the Treasury market, about liquidity in the marketplace. What are you hearing about that today and over the last couple of days?
There has been some relief there. I mean, the narrative for the past week has been that Treasuries have been selling off just as investors sell anything that isn't nailed down in an attempt to raise cash, maybe cover margin calls. And you saw Treasuries kind of bear the brunt of that selling just because they're so liquid. But at this point, the Fed has stepped up to try to restore order to that market. You know, we've seen massive liquidity injections. The central bank is buying maturities out the curve. And, it was looking a little touch and go on Wednesday, but, now we're on Friday and you're starting to see some of those strains ease. And, especially the 10-year Treasury yield dipping below 1%. I think a lot of people took confidence in that.
Yeah, interesting. We saw Goldman Sachs come out with a Q2 decline in GDP estimate of 24%. What did you make of that?
That was incredible, and I know that turned a lot of heads, both in the newsroom and on Wall Street. And again, that just goes back to the bare fact that to try to slow this virus, economic growth is going to take a hit in the process. And luckily, with some of the funding pressures easing in the Treasury market, they're starting to become a true measure of risk appetite. And both the stock market and the bond market are telling you right now that there's still a lot of fear over, how much fallout there's going to be from this outbreak.
Yeah, I think what was also interesting about that Goldman forecast, again, they're looking for minus 6% GDP in Q1, Q2 minus 24. But then equally as interesting to me, kind of a V shape here with a Q3 up 12% and Q4 GDP up 10%. So the full year is minus 3.8. That's where I think there could be even some more room for revision here, because that's a pretty sharp V they're looking for.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting. You've seen, shops such as Goldman and other forecasters around the street. They don't want to abandon those calls for a V-shaped forecast at this point. And I think it makes sense because, we don't know where the peak will come, but assuming that we do see a peak in cases sometime soon, I mean, think about where we're going to be on the other side. The Fed has eased so much at this point. We will get a big boost from this fiscal spending. So that would lend itself to a V-shaped recovery if that peak is nearing. But of course, at this point, it's impossible to know.
And Katie, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your market perspective. Katie Grayfield covers markets, cross assets for Bloomberg News, and we appreciate her commentary. Looking at the markets right here, we have still in the red here, S&P off 25 points. That's a little more than 1%. Dow off about 1% as well, 203 points, putting that Dow still below 20,000. We're at 19,881 on the Dow. NASDAQ holding in much, much better, down just 0.2% So they are down 16 points to 71.34 on NASDAQ. 10-year Treasury up 230, about 2 solid points, bringing the yield down to under 1%. Of course, we're at 0.92%. Coming up, Richard Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO, is going to join us and give us a sense of what's going on with the American workers. How bad is it out there? How bad could it be going forward? Richard Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO, joining us here on Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Apply by the 31st of March for a chance to win your first year in halls. Visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
The big B&Q Flooring and Tiles event is now on. Get a show-stopping 4 for 3 on a huge range of laminate flooring and tiles. So for an unmissable deal, hurry to B&Q. You can do it when you B&Q it. The value of every fourth item per single transaction in descending price order will be deducted. Offer ends 30th of March, subject to availability. See DIY.com.
Hello, I'm here at the Race for Life 5K, joined by Jackie Clark. Jackie, what would first place today mean to you?
I think you've got the wrong race, love. This is Race for Life. This is about beating cancer, not getting a gold medal.
And how did you train for this event?
I just turned up. It's a walk in the park, literally. Why aren't you doing it? Trainers on, let's go.
Anyone can help beat cancer. Will you? Sign up to Race for Life now, in partnership with Tesco.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win.
The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So we have the equity market trading at lower levels today. There's been a bit of chop in the water on a day when you're going to have the combination of options and futures expiring, the quadruple witching, they call it, trading probably around double the 30-day average with more than 10.1 billion shares trading so far in the equity market. We have the Dow down about 0.9%. In the broader market, the S&P 500 weaker by 1%. NASDAQ comp showing about a 0.2% drop. We have Walmart shares down 2.7%. The company's planning to dole out $545 million in early and special bonuses. This would amount to about $300 a pop for workers who are operating in overdrive to keep shelves stocked. Walmart also planning, like Amazon, to boost payroll here. Walmart is going to hire another 150,000 hourly employees. One of the things that was adversely impacting the equity market earlier, the announcement from New York Governor Cuomo, all workers, non-essential workers, or for non-essential businesses, I should say, have been ordered to stay home for the foreseeable future. And earlier also, President Trump invoking the Defense Production Act. He said he has directed certain companies to begin producing medical supplies and health care equipment. Now, Tesla CEO Elon Musk tweeted, "Yes, we're working on ventilators, even though I think they probably won't be needed. It's unclear, though, if Tesla was directed to do so." 10-year Treasury right now with a yield of 91 basis points. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Paul Sweeney.
Doug Christner, thank you so much for that. We appreciate that update. Well, clearly, one area of the economy, major area of the economy that's going to be hit is going to be employment, the worker. To get a sense of how bad this can be and what the worker needs, Richard Trumka, President, AFL-CIO, joins us on the phone. Richard, thanks so much for taking time out of what I know is your busy schedule. First of all, just give us a lay of the land of how you think this coronavirus, the economic impact on the American worker will be.
Well, I think it's going to be very broad and very deep. First of all, it's going to have an impact on the frontline workers who are having to work under adverse conditions without proper protective equipment. Those people have to still go to work. And then it's going to be immediately targeted at low-income, low-wage earners, unlike previous recessions or downturns where it went after manufacturing first and then made its way to low-income workers. They're getting hit immediately. So we're seeing layoffs in manufacturing. We're seeing layoffs in construction. We're seeing it in entertainment, all along the line, transportation of all sorts, airlines, hospitality along the lines. And you saw, of course, autos, where the big three shut down, and the whole supply chain will follow very, very quickly. So they're going to be impacted immediately. That's why we've asked that everybody get 14 paid sick days, and then that we reimagine the unemployment insurance system by broadening it and increasing both benefit levels and administrative funding for it so that we can sustain this as much as we can throughout the crisis.
Richard, we've had some fiscal stimulus packages winding their way through Congress. Based upon what you know of what's coming, do you think that they will be impactful?
I think the one we saw last night was just woefully inadequate. What we need to do is first help those people who got immediately laid off, the low-income people that generally go from paycheck to paycheck. That's why we need to get them 14 paid sick days immediately. And then we have to increase the unemployment insurance so that it's broadened, deepened, and the benefits are bigger. And then with severely impacted sectors like airlines, transportation, construction, retail, manufacturing, entertainment, and hospitality, we think that the federal government should actually assume payroll costs of idling or hibernating firms to ensure that they stay in business and workers can stay employed. And to do that, we would say that there'd be no layoffs, no pay cuts, no benefit cuts, so that workers can still begin to have some resemblance of demand and keep the economy moving so it doesn't totally collapse.
So that is much, much broader than what we've heard to date from either the administration or Congress. What is the response you've got when you've raised those types of programs?
Well, we got a very, very favorable response from the Speaker of the House and the Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer. They understand the importance, and they will tell you that it's important to get money in the hands of workers, because, as you know, our economy is 72% driven by consumer spending. If those consumers don't have any money, they can't spend. And so 14 paid sick days would be an immediate boost to the low-wage income people who are going to immediately go black and not be able to buy because they live paycheck to paycheck, and then jacking up and broadening and deepening the unemployment system so that it's longer. And as this goes on, we can still sustain some type of demand and keep the economy at least above water somewhat. Those are important things. Keeping people on the job is our main goal as much as we can. And that's why we want targeted aid to those industries that we talked about, but we want it coupled with there being no layoffs, no pay cuts, and no benefit cuts, so they don't do what they did the last time. You'll recall they got money the last time. They did stock buybacks, management bonuses, and CEO pay increases, and workers got nothing. So it was like a holiday for them. No more holidays that come from a crisis. We want this to be good for the entire economy and the workers included.
So, Richard, there's also been, I guess, initial talk in terms of getting cash back into consumers. Direct payment Secretary Mnuchin's been talking about that, as well as the president, whether it's $1,000 or $1,500 initially. What do you think about those types of moves?
Well, we need to get money in the hands of workers. But look, if all you give workers is $1,500 and then you're done, that will run out very, very quickly. We say you have to increase the unemployment program so that it's broadened to cover more people, so it goes longer and the benefits are higher. And if you stack that on top of 14 paid sick days for everybody, then you have the basis to go forward and not see the bottom fall out of demand in the country. And as I said earlier, because we're 72% driven by consumer spending, we have to have money in their hands so that they continue to spend. And with them being off the job, particularly low-wage workers that this has been targeted at so far, that's going to happen more readily unless we sustain workers in those severely affected sectors.
Richard, just quickly, how bad do you think this is going to get? Goldman Sachs was out with a note this morning saying they think the GDP could contract by 24% in the second quarter. We've never seen anything remotely like that. How bad do you think it's going to get for the American worker?
I don't think that Goldman Sachs is very far off the mark. Where I do think they're a little off the mark is they think it's going to snap back immediately so that this will be like a V. I think it'll probably be more like a U because this is going to be longer than people think. It's not going to be 2 or 3 weeks. It's not going to be just the second quarter. This is going to go through the third quarter as well. And if what the scientists are telling us, that in China they did a miraculous job, I guess, of separating people, and so they killed it. But they're now predicting that when they go back to normal life, normal production, and workers go back, they're going to get a second shot at it. Yeah. So this could be longer than we think, and we have to prepare for the long term. That's why we have to make sure that UI isn't just a single payment, but it's stretched out longer periods of time to cover more people and also better benefits so that we can sustain this.
Right, going forward. Richard Trumka, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Richard Trumka, he is a president of the AFL-CIO. What a day. We have markets in the red here. Coming up, we will drive the conversation forward. Coming up will be Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly. I'm Paul Sweeney, and this is Bloomberg.
That saying, success breeds success, it's true.
Are we seeing any improvement?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
How would you describe your outlook?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
This is the Bloomberg Green Business Report. Businesses may soon be on their honor when it comes to rules against polluting the planet. Former federal officials worry that coronavirus restrictions could bite into environmental enforcement. The Environmental Protection Agency stresses that it's continuing its mission of protecting the public from threats to human health and the environment. But Cynthia Giles, who headed enforcement at the EPA under President Barack Obama, is concerned that nationwide restrictions could cut into the number of inspectors venturing into the field. The EPA's inspection rate was already trending down before the coronavirus struck to the lowest level in at least a decade last year. Christine Todd Whitman, who led the EPA under George W. Bush, suggests the agency could ignore things now and, as she puts it, have a pretty good claim as to why. Former government lawyer Mark Ryan is hopeful big operators will continue to be honest out of fear of the PR backlash of getting caught. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city in the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
With a medical crisis in any other central bank, execute.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, the things break.
Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
And live from New York, Sleepy Hollow, New York for me, Jersey City for Carol Masser. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, what a day. New York City joining other cities and states across the country in effectively shutting down 100% work from home. That's the order from the governor of the state of New York, joining California Governor Gavin Newsom late yesterday, who said something similar about his state, the most populous in the nation. We're going to have a lot on that and much more straight ahead. First, let's get an update on the trade from Doug Krisner. Hi, Doug.
In the old days, Jason, we used to say TGIF. Boy, Friday couldn't be here soon enough. The equity market on the back foot right now, you're right. Governor Cuomo here in New York State has ordered all workers to stay at home for the foreseeable future. This mandate covers non-essential businesses. At the same time, President Trump has invoked the Defense Production Act. This is going to allow companies to have to comply with a federal mandate, basically, to produce medical supplies and healthcare equipment to address the shortages that we're seeing at hospitals across the country. A short while ago, Tesla CEO Elon Musk tweeted, "Yes, we're working on ventilators, even though I don't think they will probably be needed." Unclear if Tesla was ordered to do so. Dow Industrial Average right now weaker by 1%, S&P 500 down 1.2%, and the NASDAQ comp coming in by about 0.2%. One of the bright spots today, interestingly, energy companies. However, WTI crude oil is slumping by about 5.8%. We're trading 23.77. Russia has reportedly raised oil output, signaling the producer's commitment to a price war with Saudi Arabia. And this is interesting. The oil regulator in Texas has been invited to address the OPEC meeting in June. 10-year Treasury right now yielding 92 basis points. The dollar on the back foot. We'll talk about Fed actions as it relates to dollar liquidity momentarily with our Michael McKee. I'm Doug Krisner in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Jason and Carol.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly here with you. Carol Masser here with me as well. Carol Masser, we are going to once again look at this market, this crisis from a number of different angles.
We will indeed, and that's what we've been doing certainly all week, including finding a cure. That's the cover story, Jason, of the magazine. It's about that, and one very important researcher that's behind it all and really looking to solve what's going on here and find a solution. We've also got several key individuals who are, safe to say, Jason, on the front lines. One who was at the White House with the president earlier this week talking about the struggles in the hotel and lodging industry. And we've got another who is a leader in the telehealth industry. So we'll look at the virus from those two angles, two informed individuals.
Absolutely. And talk about an informed individual. Really looking forward to a conversation with Michael Ainsley. You and I got a chance to visit with him earlier this year. He's got a new book out. It's called A Nose for Trouble. But more importantly, he's the former chairman of Lehman Brothers. He was in the room when the decision was made for that firm to go bankrupt. He saw the financial crisis firsthand. He's also the former chairman, president, CEO of Sotheby's. Really perspective you're going to want to check out. That's in our 5 p.m. hour.
Yeah, looking forward to that. All right. In the meantime, let's set the Business Week agenda. We've got with us right now Michael McKee, international economics and policy correspondent at Bloomberg News. He's back in our Interactive Broker studio, along with Dave Wilson, stocks editor at Bloomberg News. Mike, I do want to start with you because I do feel like you are seeing central banks increasingly, and certainly the U.S. Central Bank, taking moves to shore up, whether it's the money market or various other markets within our financial system, to ensure that it's a liquid market.
You put your finger on it, Carol. That's what they're trying to do. It's not a question of enabling you to make the markets trade higher. It's just so that you can trade at all. And that's the problem that this virus has caused. It's morphed from a health crisis to a financial crisis because everybody's, well, it's the same thing, Jason, you were just mentioning Lehman Brothers. The same thing that happened to Lehman and Bear at the time. People just wouldn't trade with them because they were afraid they wouldn't get paid back. And that's what we're seeing is sort of a freeze up in the markets because counterparties are concerned about the other half of the trade. So the Fed is making sure that people understand there is another side of the trade if they have to step in.
All right. So, Dave Wilson, come on in here. Help us understand, speaking of the trade today. On the surface, it's a bit more muted. At least we're not having, massive 5, 6, 8, 10% swings. And yet a little bit of volatility here as people try and figure out this end of the week scene.
Absolutely. And there's an element of who has money and who doesn't in it all. It's interesting just to look at the S&P 500 to see United Airlines really kind of breaking with its peers today. I mean, the shares are up more than 16%. And then I go right to the Bloomberg terminal and see a story about how the private equity firm Apollo Global Management bought a chunk of a loan from banks that wanted to get rid of it. So, there's financing presumably that stays in place. And United can certainly use the money as all the airlines can at this point, given that they're talking to the government about a potential rescue package. And then on the other hand, you've got Dish Networks, one of the worst performers in the S&P 500, down about 11%. And I go to my terminal, I see Bloomberg Intelligence has an analysis that says the company, which is trying to move beyond satellite television and go into wireless, that they may have a liquidity shortfall of as much as $19 billion through 2023. That means they got to come up with a bunch of money to play out their plans. And that's not going to be that easy to do given the way that things have swung in the last several weeks. So, having those sort of contrasts, you can understand why share prices are a bit all over the place, even as the indexes sort of stabilize a bit.
Well, you also had the president come out and say, and he was questioned in his press conference, late in the press conference and the update on the virus, that he's not so into buyback, share buyback. So if markets and investors and companies were counting on that, you could also understand that if he's backing off that in terms of some of the negotiating for bailout packages, you could understand why stocks are lower. Mike, I do want to ask you, I think this is an interesting day, an important day, because we're going to head into a weekend. What should we expect from central banks? What should we expect from the Fed over the weekend, who's going to be keeping an eye on things when the markets close down?
Well, Carol, I could use a couple of days off, so I hope not very much.
I hear you.
We may have seen most of what's going to happen for the next few days. The Fed in particular has been going day by day, looking at what parts of the market need help and then trying to address that. They'll be looking at the take-up for their purchases of treasuries and mortgage securities today. Each day they've ramped it up and bought more and more because they're not seeing a reaction in the markets, and they may need to wait and see what happens on Monday. They've done just about everything that they can do on the credit side, the acronym facilities that they put in place in 2008 that they have brought back. There's not a whole lot left for them to do there, except maybe one for asset-backed securities. We'll see if that comes. But the urgency to get it done over the weekend, and you guys remember during the early days after Lehman Brothers, it was always they had to do it by the market open on Sunday night.
Right.
I think that has sort of faded for the Fed, and the ECB obviously will be going into the markets during the week during market hours to buy. So it isn't clear that we need emergency action now over the weekend from these guys, but watch again on Monday.
Absolutely. All right. Michael McKee, thank you so much. International economics and policy correspondent, giving us some really terrific perspective on the Fed's role, central bank's role in all of this. It has been critical. It has been the story that we come back to every day. And Dave Wilson, stocks editor, of course, for Bloomberg. You'll be back a little bit later on with the chart and stock of the day. Carol, you want to do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day? It's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number, it's 150,000.
Yeah, big box retailer Walmart saying yesterday it would hire more than 150,000 hourly workers in the U.S., citing a jump in shoppers due to the coronavirus pandemic. Now, rival Amazon.com made a similar move earlier in the week. They said they would hire about 100,000 warehouse and delivery workers in the U.S. as the virus outbreak boosts online orders. Walmart also saying it plans to pay a special cash bonus of $300 to full-time hourly workers and $150 to part-time associates. The company will accelerate the next scheduled quarterly bonus. It said, it's interesting, Jason, too. My supermarket, they're staying open, man. They're working really hard. I was talking to them, and they're like, we're gonna try and figure it out because we want to make sure we can support our community. So pretty impressive.
That supply chain, really important. All right, let's get to Bob Moon now. He's got world and national headlines here in New York. Hey, Bob.
Jason, Carol, good day. President Trump is pledging more fiscal aid until the economy recovers, as he puts it, until we get this going. The Trump administration is said to see the proposed Senate Republican stimulus measure as too small in some areas and wants it to include direct payments to more individuals. The president said he's aiming to pay for keeping Americans home from work.
We're working out a tremendous financial package for them so they don't work. Who ever heard of this? Usually you work out a financial package to get people working. We're asking people not to work.
Trump told reporters his administration is talking about much more than a $1,000 check for each American. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced the border with Mexico as well as Canada would be closed to non-essential travel. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman has more.
Joining the White House coronavirus briefing, Pompeo cautioned Americans not to fall for internet disinformation, whether planted by foreign powers or by fellow Americans.
Information that at one time suggested somehow this virus emanated from the United States Army, this information about lockdowns that are taking place. Every American, indeed people all around the world, should ensure that where they turn to for information is a reliable source and not a bad actor trying to create and flow information that they know is wrong.
Pompeo reiterated his call for Americans not to travel overseas or to prepare for a long stay abroad if they're outside the United States. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Two people who are as fascinated by the markets as you are.
What's your sense of the competitive landscape in the cloud business?
Lisa Abramowitz.
People were talking about potential regulatory pressure.
And Paul Sweeney.
Are you seeing flows into ESG ETFs?
Bloomberg Markets.
What's your main conversation today with some of these corporate executives?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern.
They're spending a lot of money there.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, GOAT, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance?
Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services.
The happy family of 3 were about to welcome a new member. That's right, they were finally getting a dog.
Buy on eBay, dog bed from £12.
First, they had to make a few adjustments.
Sell white rug.
And prepare the kids for the reality of owning a pet.
Buy biodegradable poop bags from under £6.
Everyone instantly fell in love with Little Rocky. Unfortunately, Little Rocky fell in love with a cushion. Buy, sell, eBay.
Delivery costs may apply.
Dad wanted to get Mum a beauty treatment for Mother's Day. The kids wanted to do something homemade. So they compromised. And now Mummy's got no eyebrows. Don't compromise. With a Cadbury milk tray, just £2.50, you won't have to. Asda. Selected stores subject to availability, 360 grams.
We Brits know how to roll our sleeves up. We know how to keep calm and carry on. We also know a great offer when we see one. Like the all-new Vauxhall Corsa with 0 deposit and 0% interest. So, you know what to do. Search Corsa offer. Come off the offer, come off the hour. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. Personal contract purchase on selected new Vauxhall Corsas. Subject to status, terms and conditions apply. 18 plus, Vauxhall Finance. Offer ends 31st of March.
Hello, I'm here at the Race for Life 5K, joined by Jackie Clark. Jackie, what would first place today mean to you?
I think you've got the wrong race, love. This is Race for Life. This is about beating cancer, not getting a gold medal.
And how did you train for this event?
I just turned up. It's a walk in the park, literally. Why aren't you doing it? Trainers on, let's go.
Anyone can help beat cancer. Will you? Sign up to Race for Life now, in partnership with Tesco.
Make life easy with Sky TV and Netflix all in one place on Sky Q. Discover Sky originals like Intelligence.
I think we can learn a lot from each other.
Right next to Netflix originals like You.
It's nice to meet you, love.
Find them all side by side on Sky Q. So, get Sky Ultimate TV for just £25 a month. Easy. Visit sky.com and join today. Ends April 30th. Prices may change. 18-month minimum term on Sky Signature. Set up £20 requires Sky Q connected to broadband. Correct at March 13th. Terms apply.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, we're at 17 past the hour. We have weaker equities. Today, Governor Cuomo in New York State ordered all workers for non-essential businesses to stay at home for the foreseeable future. Also today, President Trump invoking the Defense Production Act. He says that he has directed certain companies to begin producing medical supplies and healthcare equipment as a way of addressing the shortages that we're seeing at hospitals across the country. Also, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell saying he wants to pass a massive stimulus by Monday. Legislation is expected to top $1 trillion. But Treasury Secretary Mnuchin was saying the GOP bill is too small and he wants broader cash payments. Bloomberg Economics is expecting 9% contraction in GDP during the second quarter. Worst case, we could see contraction 14% in that period. Goldman Sachs more pessimistic. A team led by Jan Hatzius, the chief economist there, sees GDP in Q2 in the U.S. down 24%. And a short while ago, the European Union predicting that the 2020 recession in Europe may be comparable to what we saw in 2009. Equity volume today nearly double the usual because of expiration of options and futures contracts. The Dow right now weaker by 1.7%, S&P 500 down 1.8%, NASDAQ comp weaker by 1%. Walmart is planning to dole out 545 million in early and special bonuses. The stock right now down 3.3%. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. Let's go to Massachusetts now. The governor of that state, Charlie Baker, holding a press conference, I should say, from the State House. Let's check in.
And they've told me their stories and shared their dreams and their fears. Those stories and the many experiences that we've had in our communities are a source of great confidence and comfort in this particular moment, because we all appreciate the remarkable strength and character of the people of Massachusetts. At the same time, the restrictions we've put in place will only work if everyone embraces them, and especially embraces the notion of social distancing and does everything in their power to prevent the spread of this dangerous virus. We need to remember that we're all in this together, and that we ask everyone to take responsibility to do their part to stop the spread of this horribly contagious virus. If we do, then we can and will get through it. Now, with respect to a few updates, it's no secret that Massachusetts is home to many incredible life sciences companies that are dedicated to developing solutions to healthcare issues across the world. And they've brought that same dedication to the table as they've thought about how to respond to COVID-19. And I'm not talking here about particular companies in Massachusetts that are either working on vaccines, diagnostic tools, testing, or treatment proposals and options. What I'm talking about is a partnership that MassBio put together with MassMedic, the Massachusetts Health and Hospital Association, and the Conference of Boston Teaching Hospitals, which they launched with the Massachusetts Life Science Center to create an emergency supply hub to help coordinate efforts to try to bring additional supplies and resources to our state's healthcare institutions. This includes lab, testing, and diagnostic supplies, personal protective equipment, and medical expertise. There's already been in one day a very robust response from many folks who are willing to step up, donate, and help. Bob Coughlin from MassBio will speak in more detail on this initiative in a minute. MassBio is sharing the information that they get from companies with DPH and with the command center to triage and connect suppliers with those healthcare providers that need them. I encourage all life science companies to visit massbio.org to see how you can help, and I want to thank all of the organizations that have already responded to this request. With respect to testing, the Commonwealth continues to make progress on implementing additional ways to test people for COVID-19. On Thursday, CVS in Shrewsbury opened the state's first large-scale drive-through COVID-19 testing site, which is a partnership between our administration, the federal government, local health authorities, and CVS. This specific site will be for emergency personnel and first responders, and will expanding testing access to frontline workers. Currently, this site is one of over 40 sites that are launching throughout the country over the next week, with test kits supplied by the federal government. The specimens will be processed at Quest Diagnostics in Marlborough, which Lieutenant Governor, Secretary Sutters, and I toured yesterday to see the testing facilities they plan to use as they ramp up their COVID-19 testing capacity as well. We'll continue to work across all levels to expand capacity here in the Commonwealth. Yesterday, we activated the Massachusetts National Guard to support our administration's efforts to keep people safe and healthy during the COVID-19 outbreak. The order authorizes the activation of up to 2,000 National Guard members in the Commonwealth, and these Guard members will be tasked with a variety of initiatives, mostly around supporting state agencies and local governments with equipment, logistics, warehousing, staff support, and other duties. I'd also like to dispel, once again, recent rumors about a shelter-in-place order. Massachusetts is not planning any forced shelter-in-place order. Everyone needs to get their news from legitimate sources. Please check mass.gov/COVID-19 for updates. Our state and local health officials are monitoring this issue around the clock and will work as hard as they possibly can to provide new resources and support to residents, providers, first responders, and others who are on the front lines of this cause. Finally, I have a message for tenants and homeowners who are dealing with financial hardship due to the virus. We know you are worried, and we are going to do everything we can to ensure that nobody loses their housing because of this crisis. We'll have more to say on this in the coming days, but for now, I want renters to know the current standing orders in the Massachusetts trial court means there will be no pending eviction cases that can proceed until at least April 21st. And for homeowners who are worried about making a mortgage payment, our state laws provide 90 days to cure any payment default on a mortgage. To be clear, this administration will be taking action in the coming days to ensure that homeowners and renters are protected. This obviously remains an incredibly challenging and difficult couple of weeks for us all. And while we're still at the beginning stages of this battle and we have much more to do, by working together, we're doing the right things to slow down the spread of the virus and to enhance our ability to care for the people who do get ill from it. I do want to thank all the frontline workers, first responders, state and local government employees, and everyone else who's doing all they can to step up during this crisis. And I also want to thank everybody at home.
Let's head to Trenton now, where another governor, that would be Phil Murphy of the state of New Jersey, is giving remarks. He is at, Paramus, Carol Massard, New Jersey, at a testing facility.
Today, including at the Department of Health, in addition to the private sector players, the numbers are going up. Just know that. But again, that gives us also some ability to even better and more proactively manage the challenge. Earlier today, I signed legislation that builds on the steps that we've already taken to ensure that all coronavirus testing will be done free of any insurance copays to those being tested. And I thank again the legislature for their action. Both sides of the aisle, beginning with the leadership, beginning with the Senate President and Speaker, I can't thank them enough. Also, we are ensuring that anyone without insurance does not have to pay for a test. Cost will not be a barrier for anyone. Again, expanding testing is absolutely critical for a couple of reasons. First, of course, people may be exhibiting signs of